Chapter 823. Unknown force field data has been recorded, tentatively designated as Spatial Anomaly Z1. Start recording relevant information. During the occurrence of Spatial Anomaly Z1, it will affect the surrounding spatial anomaly reaction and create a spatial door that allows the target beta to intervene in this world. In addition, there is no limit to the number of individuals that beta can intervene in this space. Usually, the number of individuals that appear is more than a plurality. It is estimated that the probability of artificially creating spatial anomaly Z1 is 88%. Through the countless sensors distributed around the throne, Sharon was constantly collecting spatial anomaly data from the asteroid belt during the fierce battle. At the same time, she was also monitoring the abnormal situation around her. The number of anomalies found exceeded the current monitoring level. It is estimated to be a super-large mass individual. Among the countless abnormal data, Sharon quickly locked onto the abnormal signal that was like a light in the night. It was a coordinate located behind the asteroid belt. Before that coordinate, it was the position of the light level that Mecha had locked onto from the beginning. Sure enough, is it the command center of Beta? While Sharon was thinking, an abnormal signal that was even more violent than before rose sharply. Buzz. As this abnormal signal was locked onto, the defense system of the throne was instantly activated by Sharon. A layer of powerful defensive energy shield effortlessly blocked the terrifying beam of light that came across the sky. Facing the dazzling light, streams of water kept flashing through Sharon's eyes. Her computing power discovered the enemy's attack and made corresponding countermeasures. At the same time, she was frantically calculating the survival probability of someone who was drowned by the terrifying beam of light. In the end, there was only one. There was no possibility of survival. But for some reason, Sharon had an incomparably firm trust in Lancelot, the Sword of the King, and even Mecha. This was an incredible feat for an AI. But for the current Sharon, it was already something that she was used to. Launch the Stronghold Cannon. Charge begin. As soon as the terrifying beam of light that bombarded the energy shield disappeared, Sharon decisively launched the first time the throne had used the main cannon of the satellite fortress, since it became the symbol of imperial power of the Britannia Empire. Charge begins. The current progress is 10%. Enter the designated coordinates. Confirm the coordinates again. The target individual is detected to be passing through Spatial Anomaly Z1. Target individual locked. Currently, 50% charged. Suddenly, a familiar signal appeared in the dead space, filled with wreckage. It was a sign that Lancelot, King's Sword, was still alive. However, Sharon did not take the initiative to contact Mecha. Instead, she chose to focus on controlling the main cannon's firing. She knew, right now, he had to seize the opportunity and kill the target that was about to pass through the Spatial Anomaly Z1. Otherwise, the following battle would definitely become extremely difficult. That was because it was not an ordinary beta individual, but the key to controlling the cosmic beta that Euphemia had specifically reminded them to pay attention to at the meeting not long ago. It was a cosmic mothership-type hive, and it was even very likely that it was a satellite fortress-type hive like the Throne of Command. The only difference between them was their size and the defensive equipment they had. Yes, compared to the land hive, the cosmic hive seemed to have a more important mission, which led to it having far more and more powerful equipment than the land hive. For example, the terrifying beam of light just now. That was a weapon that was as powerful as the main cannon of a satellite fortress. However, no matter how terrifying the weapon of the cosmic hive was, it was just a false alarm for Sharon, who had discovered it first by monitoring the abnormal signal and taken defensive measures. Now, what Sharon needed to do was to kill the cosmic hive that was passing through the Spatial Anomaly Z1. The various radars of the Throne of Command kept sending out signals, locking onto the cosmic hive that was struggling to rush out of the door. Looking at the optical camera, the cosmic hive that was several kilometers long had only passed through a part of it, and a trace of killing intent flashed in Sharon's eyes. This was not because of the anger that the human race was almost wiped out by the beta in the database, but because Ray Minkai was almost buried by the terrifying attack launched by the Cosmic Hive. In Sharon's field of vision, the moment the signal that represented Lancelot, King's sword, was lit up, it was the moment the Longsong cannon was fully charged. 100% charged. Target locked. Fire. Boom. It was even more terrifying than the beam of light that came from the sky just now. The moment an even more terrifying energy fluctuation erupted from the interior of the Throne of Command was the moment the Throne of Command's satellite fortress cannon roared. The surging brilliance was like the Milky Way surging above the nine heavens. With an unstoppable momentum, it directly dispersed the beta army that was trying to close again and trap Lancelot, King's sword. In an instant, behind the beta army that had turned into ashes in the brilliance was the Cosmic Hive that had been pierced through by the Throne of Command's fortress cannon. However, compared to before, the Cosmic Hive that had not completely rushed out of the door did not use the ability of an energy shield like the Throne of Command to block the attack. It could only rely on its huge body to take the attack of the Throne of Command. The surging river of brilliance wantonly impacted the body of the Cosmic Hive. Even though it had a body that was so huge that it was calculated in kilometers, it still could not stop the terrifying energy that invaded its huge body from wreaking havoc. Roar! Its huge body was twisting crazily, as if it wanted to break free from the door to make itself feel better. However, it was too late. The moment the first wave of energy that tore apart the huge body from the inside of the Cosmic Hive rushed out of its huge body, the Cosmic Hive had stepped onto the road to hell. Looking at the crack that crazily tore apart the huge body that was several kilometers long, even if sound could not be transmitted in the vacuum, the humans who witnessed all of this could not help but think of the struggle, roar, and even the final wail of a beast before its death. The only difference was that at the end of the wail, what would be left in front of the human's eyes was not the corpse of a beast, but a dazzling fireball that was as bright as the sun. And the moment the huge body turned into a fireball, the shock wave that erupted from the explosion scattered the rubble and asteroids that flew into the depths of the void. At the same time, around the fireball, the remaining beta gave up on pursuing Lancelot, King's sword. Instead, they turned around and flew towards a certain coordinate in the depths of the void. It was as if they were insects that had lost the queen of their dominant race, instinctively moving towards the area where the next race was located. What's that? Witnessing all of this, Ray Minkai decisively activated the prediction system of Tarsus, but he found nothing. The actions of the beta that had turned around and continued to accelerate away from the Throne of Domination seemed to have exceeded the range that the Tarsus system could predict. Sharon, is there a reconnaissance drone on the Throne of Domination? Shoot it out immediately and follow those bugs. Without hesitation, Ray Minkai immediately issued an order to Sharon. Yes, sir. The next moment, two fluorescent lights flew out from the shadow of the Throne of Domination and chased after the remaining beta's energy reaction. At this moment, the battle seemed to be over. However, the mystery still lingered in Ray Minkai's mind. Euphemia's previous worries had become a reality. The universe-type beta that ruled the universe around the throne would not only be controlled by a single hive. Before the two reconnaissance drones sent a new round of intelligence, it was unknown how many beta were hidden in the universe around the Throne of Domination. Of course, this was also a matter for the future. Now, the matter in front of them was probably the job of explaining to the people on the Minerva led by Talia. Half an hour later, while Ray Minkai and Ethelum explained the source of the beta to Talia and the others, Lakis, who appeared as Audrey Britannia, also got a chance to be alone with Dr. Serene. Compared to the solemn expression of Talia and the others, Celine's expression was much more interesting. "Alright, Miss Audrey, why are you here?" Celine, who had experienced the Battle of Yagan Duway with Audrey, naturally knew what kind of appearance Audrey Britannia had behind this face. However, when the intelligent female doctor saw Audrey Britannia's face appear again, she already understood something. The female doctor, who calmed herself down as much as possible, smiled. Since Miss is here, then that night must be here too. Then, I'm relieved. Lakis' gaze had been observing Celine's expression. The sharp Lakis saw fatigue, fear, and even uneasiness in Celine's expression. Dr. Celine, long time no see. I didn't expect that we would meet again in such a way. Please have a seat. After Lakis guided Celine to sit down, she poured her a cup of warm black tea to help her stabilize her emotions. Celine picked up the teacup with trembling hands and took a sip. Her expression was much calmer. Sigh, that's true. It seems that our conjecture was correct. Celine first sighed, then looked at Lakis with a burning gaze. Miss Audrey, perhaps it's a little presumptuous. But now, please answer me with a truthful and credible answer. No, it should be the question that all of us D members have been asking all along. Lakis smiled lightly, naturally knowing what Celine wanted to ask. Yes, Doctor, your conjecture is correct. The world now isn't the world that we are familiar with. No, perhaps in the world that we are in now, other than some things that we are familiar with, other things, people, and even our understanding of the world have changed. Hearing Lux's reply, Celine sighed faintly. It seems that behind X1, there is indeed a world that we can't touch. And Miss Audrey, and that night, is fortunate enough to be able to travel through it. In response, Lux smiled bitterly. Doctor, believe me, this isn't a beautiful thing. Yes, Celine sighed. That's true. Chapter 824. Celine lowered her gaze and looked at the slightly rippling black tea in her cup. She could not help but recall the changes that happened when the X1 crack suddenly mutated. The sound that suddenly came from the X1 crack. The monster that suddenly rushed out of the X1 crack. And the various sensors in the space station that almost malfunctioned at the same time. Dr. Celine, do you remember anything? Lakis raised her head and looked in the direction of the conference room. There, Ray Minkai was announcing the existence of the beta. It was not hard to imagine how Talia and the others would react when they found out that the monster that had been chasing them was a monster from another dimension. But compared to Talia and the others, Dr. Celine, who had been studying the X1 crack, was calm. No, it should be said that she was like a flame hidden under the snow, waiting for the moment to completely melt the snow. Miss Audrey, Celine took a slow breath and sorted out her emotions before continuing. After you and that night went missing in the Battle of Yakin Due, we, the D, were entrusted with the heavy responsibility of the neutral countries led by Scandinavia, the Earth Alliance, and ZAF to conduct research on the X1 rift as quickly as possible. Not long after the research began, Lord Sienna came to D Space Station as an official envoy of Scandinavia. Speaking of Sienna, Celine's speed of speech subconsciously slowed down while she observed the changes in Lakis' expression. However, Lakis nodded slightly and motioned for Celine to continue. At that time, after seeing the various preparations that D had done for the X1 crack, Lord Sienna specially called me and the director to the side. Lakis bit her lips slightly. She seemed to understand why her father, Sienna, would specially call the director of D and Dr. Celine aside. But Lakis' rationality did not think that Sienna would do such a risky thing. After Lord Sienna watched the video of SS Eternity's Bridge, she believed that you in the night could return to your hometown. Video of SS Eternity's Bridge. Lakis was stunned. She remembered the changes that happened to her when the Longfong lion destroyed the Genesis with its full power. The sudden disappearance of a living human in front of their eyes must have scared the hell out of everyone on the SS Eternity, right? Yes. That video was then deleted. The relevant personnel were also separated for various reasons and placed in various places in Scandinavia to guard this secret and become ordinary people. Is that so? I didn't expect that everyone would suffer so much because of my momentary willfulness. I'm sorry. Lakis sighed faintly. Even if Celine did not elaborate on the details, Lux, who was born as the heir of a powerful political family and had traveled among various civilizations as an ambassador of peace in the universe, naturally understood the price that the relevant personnel had to pay. No, perhaps it was a trial. Perhaps it was more of a blessing. Blessing? Lakis was confused. Yes. Not long after our D began our research on the X1 rift, something strange seemed to have happened all over Earth. Disasters caused by unknown causes began to appear on land and in the sea. As Serene spoke, she pressed on her wristwatch and showed Lakis the photos that were taken by humans during the disaster. In the beginning, the various countries seemed to treat these unknown disasters as a chain reaction caused by the movement of plates. Following Celine's narration, the distorted timeline after the Battle of Yajin Due slowly unfolded in front of Lakis' eyes. In the first month after the Battle of Yajin Due, an unknown giant creature appeared in the center of the Pacific Ocean and encountered a fishing fleet. The fishing fleet was almost completely destroyed, and only a few fishermen escaped death. They were stranded on a deserted island for several months before they were rescued. Almost at the same time, a meteorite fell to the east of the Atlantic Ocean. But strangely, before the meteorite fell, the asteroid monitoring radar network around Earth did not detect any traces of the meteorite. Under the shroud of such a mystery, time passed quickly and reached a critical moment 2 years later. On this day, DSSD finally made a breakthrough in the new technology of how to establish real-time contact with the drone that had advanced into the X1 rift. On this day, the drone equipped with the new technology appeared again and broke into the X1 rift. On this day, under the watchful eyes of many of DSSD, as top technicians, the drone that entered the X1 rift successfully established real-time contact with the space station behind it. On this day, an unfamiliar audio was captured by the drone and sent back to the space station. On this day, DSSD space station, which might have received a greeting from an alien civilization for the first time, was suddenly attacked by a monster and had no choice but to send out a distress signal. What happened next was that after the people were taken in by the Minerva, they fled all the way to the throne of command. Audio? Dr. Serene, can I take a look at it? Lakis pondered for a moment, as if digesting the many things that Dr. Serene said, before asking to see the unfamiliar and mysterious audio. Sure. In fact, we did a preliminary analysis the moment we obtained this audio. The results of the analysis show that this is a sound wave similar to the call of a whale. Serene pressed her wristwatch again. While playing the unfamiliar and mysterious audio, she also turned on the external function. The sound of a whale? When she was young, the curious Lakis had once asked Sienna to find a lot of information about the sound of whales. The reason wasn't the young Lakis's curiosity about the ocean. It was caused by the fossil of a winged whale that was brought back from Jupiter by George, the first regulator in human history. She listened to the sound of whales that she had heard when she was young. In front of her was the undulating curve that indicated the height of the sound wave. Lakis's brows gradually furrowed. A strange feeling crept into Lakis's heart. For some reason, this audio that sounded like the sound of a whale made Lakis feel an indescribable strangeness. Dr. Serene, maybe you can use the equipment here to conduct a new round of analysis. When Lakis lifted her gaze, she said something that made Serene feel both astonished and pleasantly surprised. Miss, you're saying that I can use the equipment here? I'll talk to Kai about the details. Prepare the piece for Dr. Serene first. Lakis nodded as a promise before asking, What's the matter? Before the accident, did Father come to the space station? No. It seems that because he agreed with Miss Clea to help the refugees stranded at the border of Scandinavia, he didn't come to the space station to participate in this experiment according to the original plan. Is that so? I got it. Also, I hope that Dr. Serene can keep her meeting a secret. To this, Serene gladly accepted. Yes, Miss Audrey. Lakis' side made good progress, but Raymond Kai's side seemed to be in a stalemate. Talia closed her eyes and silently rubbed the bridge of her nose, trying to relieve the pressure that had accumulated until now. The trio's expressions were even more different. Real Flying Bird frowned deeply and looked at the image on the screen for a long time without saying a word. Luna Maria looked confused and secretly looked left and right, trying to get an explanation from her partner. Unfortunately, there was no result. Whether it was real flying bird or Reza bearer, both of them were shocked by what Lame Minkai had told them. Traveling through the world. This was something that should only exist in sci-fi novels, movies, and even TV dramas, but it actually happened to them. How could they react to this and calmly accept it? Especially since the rescue of the D space station under the pursuit of the Beta, the Minerva, which only cared about escaping for its life, had accomplished the feat that should have been recorded in the annals of history. They had no idea how the Minerva completed the entire process. Captain, can we contact the Zaft headquarters? Ray took a deep breath and looked at Talia. On the Minerva, other than Talia, only Ray could directly contact the Zaft headquarters. No, it should be said that the man standing at the top of Plant's power. Hearing this, Talia opened her eyes, looked at Ray, and slowly shook her head. No. At first, I thought Minerva's communication was destroyed in the battle, but after I asked Night K to borrow the high-power communication system of this satellite fortress to try to contact the headquarters, I still encountered the same situation. Talia glanced at the only 3 remaining MS pilots on Minerva. Now, we have to face the fact that we have lost contact with the headquarters and even Plant. Captain, in other words, it is very likely that we really traveled through the world unknowingly. Real Flying Bird raised her gaze and glanced at Ray Minkai, who was standing in front of the big screen and watching the exchange of the people on the Minerva, and expressed her thoughts. Real, what nonsense are you talking about? Ray had just opened his mouth to speak when he was interrupted by Talia. Okay, Ray, we do have to face the fact. It is very likely that we have completed this feat. While speaking, Talia looked at Ray Minkai and stared at the white gold-rimmed mask on Ray Minkai's face for a long time. Of course, if Night K can provide more evidence to prove this hypothesis, we will be very grateful. Ray Minkai nodded slightly. Naturally, he would not refuse this request. The evidence had been prepared from the beginning. Sharon, take it out. Yes, Your Highness. The stream of light appeared from top to bottom, and a familiar yet unfamiliar map of Earth was displayed in front of Talia, Real Flying Bird, Luna Maria, and Ray. Everyone, this is the map of the territory of the Holy Britannia Empire. Of course, this is the map before the Ultra disaster. Now, the Holy Britannia Empire's territory is only left with the American mainland and the satellite fortress that you are in. The reason is the same as everyone. The reason for this is a battle that took place before the Super Calamity, a battle that may be called a battle between mortals and gods. On the map was the huge figure of the winged god, who was like a god descending. Chapter 825. A formation of drones equipped with high-precision detection equipment glided over the asteroid belt. When they arrived near the target coordinates, they gradually spread out and gradually monitored the changes in the space around the target coordinates according to the plan. And around this formation of drones, there were many drones equipped with cleaning tools and specialized in battlefield cleaning. These drones specialized in cleaning up the wreckage, except for collecting some specific wreckage, packing it up, and transferring it to the throne of the rear. The rest of the wreckage was either destroyed on the spot or pushed into the asteroid belt, leaving these worthless wreckage to become part of the asteroid belt forever. In this quiet but busy scene, a space shuttle with the Zaft logo painted on its wings quietly glided past. And in this space shuttle, Talia's line of sight just happened to be retracted from the drones that pushed the wreckage into the asteroid belt or collected some specific wreckage and brought it back to the throne. Crossing worlds, Talia sighed inwardly. Although the existence of Beta was terrifying, it was far less shocking than the alternate world shown by Ray Minkai. No matter how smart Talia was, she could not imagine what kind of scene it would be when the same Earth, but not the same country, appeared in front of her eyes. Captain, Arthur, who was sitting in the back, hesitated for a moment but did not continue. Talia knew the meaning of Arthur's words. Her deputy was puzzled and even a little dissatisfied with her decision to completely entrust the repair of the Minerva to the satellite fortress and expressed that she would not intervene at all. This was inevitable. After all, the Minerva was at the forefront of Zaph's combat order, the most sophisticated and also the most advanced warship with the highest confidentiality program. Zaph spent so much manpower and material resources to build a new warship, but it was so easy. Arthur, I know what you mean, but the situation is stronger than the person. We can no longer get in touch with headquarters or even plant, and we have to face the fact that we have already. Talia's words were at the tip of her tongue, but she could not help but pause. Yes, even if she had already admitted the truth in her heart, it was still quite difficult for her to say it out loud. But after all, she was the woman that man valued the most. With a little adjustment, Talia accepted the status quo. Arthur, we are now in a strange world. Do you think there is any need for our insistence and our secrecy to continue? Especially that satellite fortress that even our Zaph or even the Earth Alliance couldn't build. As she spoke, Talia's gaze once again shifted to the outside of the porthole. She looked at the group of drones that were busily and orderly carrying out various tasks. Perhaps Talia didn't know how to build such a massive satellite fortress. However, when it came to commanding an army, especially when it came to high-tech troops in large numbers, Talia was very clear about it. Perhaps in the eyes of his deputy, Arthur, the drones coming and going outside looked very convenient, but in fact, this was something Zaph couldn't do. This was because every drone's mission involved a huge amount of calculations. However, these massive calculations were completed by the central computer of the sovereign throne alone. If this huge amount of computing power was used in a battle, especially in a large-scale battle, it would give the side with such a huge computing power an unparalleled advantage. Arthur opened his mouth, but in the end, he didn't say anything to refute. As slow-witted as he was, after seeing the ability displayed by the figure standing next to Ray Minkai, he had to admit that Talia's decision would indeed make the life of the Minerva and the crew better. After all, no one wanted to be a prisoner. Moreover, the other party had no malice toward the Minerva. The space shuttle that silently crossed the battlefield returned to the sovereign throne while the two were talking. The drones that remained on the battlefield that had extinguished the flames of war were still constantly probing the coordinates of the hive wreckage. Above the dome, there was a night sky scattered with sparse starlight. Under the night sky, there were masks looking up at the night sky. In this night sky, every time a star lit up, there would be a burst of cheers from under the masks. Not long after, the night sky that originally only had sparse starlight had already changed into a different appearance. Bright and resplendent, a spectacular and dazzling galaxy traversed the night sky, scattering endless starlight and illuminating the masks. It's lit up. It's lit up. It's lit up. It's lit up. Our dream has come true. The world is connected. At this moment, the cheers coming from under the masks turned into screams. Screams of joy. Screams of joy from the realization of their dream. No one could resist the joy brought by the realization of their long-held dream. Even if these people were the most patient and most capable members of the Parliament of Destiny in the eyes of the Space Administration and many inspectors. The cheers were louder and louder. In the night sky that was traversed by the galaxy, every time a new star lit up, the members would burst into louder and louder cheers. However, in this moment of blazing cheers, a discordant sound interrupted everything. It was the sound of footsteps. It was a soft but undeniable sound of footsteps. The masked people looking up at the starry sky lowered their heads and looked in the direction of the sound. The next moment, all the members bowed their heads in a posture of submission. This was to welcome the arrival of the king. This was to welcome the arrival of the god who had the power to realize their dreams. The sound of footsteps came from afar. Even if the footsteps had already sounded in front of them, the members who bowed their heads did not dare to raise their heads until the footsteps went further away. When they reached the high platform under the starry sky that was surrounded by endless starlight, the members dared to slowly raise their heads to look at the high platform. The endless starlight quietly descended and lingered on the long hair that reached the ground, weaving a starry crown. The members finally saw the figure standing on a high platform. Lord, Lord, our Savior, the Lord who will lead us out of suffering. When the crown made of starlight shone brightly, the beautiful face with tightly shut eyes became an eternal memory that was engraved in the hearts of the counselors at this moment. Silence. In the excitement of witnessing the god's appearance, the voice of the Parliament of Destiny's chairman sounded in the air and echoed under the night sky for a long time. At the same time, the chairman who rarely appeared under the high platform and took the lead to bow to the sacred figure standing on the high platform. A long wait. A long wait. We have finally waited for your return. God who cares for the unfortunate. I don't remember when I cared for you. The moment the voice came from the high platform, the members actually knelt on the ground with a plop. Yes, you have never cared for us. This is just a moment of our arrogance. The man standing on the top of the Parliament of Destiny bowed deeply, but did not directly kneel on the ground like the other members. Arrogance? The figure shrouded in starlight sneered, but did not refute the chairman's words. After glancing at the chairman, she turned around and sat down on the only throne on the high platform, looking up at the galaxy in the night sky. The star is extinguished. Hearing this, the speaker of the inn trembled. He suddenly looked up at the starry sky and the river of stars that stretched across the horizon. Sure enough, behind the bright starlight, a star that had just lit up quietly extinguished all its brilliance and disappeared behind starlight. At this moment, a feeling of uneasiness climbed up the chairman's heart, but he forcibly suppressed it. Sorry to have troubled you. This is just a small problem that happened during the world fusion. We have prepared many solutions to deal with it. Then let me wait and see. An obscure fluctuation quietly appeared, like a splash of ripples on the surface of the water, constantly shaking the space and time, and shaking the many worlds that had already been shattered by the super disaster caused by the world fusion. It was starlight. It was to make up for the ripples caused by the extinguished starlight. Behind that resplendent galaxy, there were no beautiful and moving stars, but a terrible, painful disaster full of wails. Some people died, some people struggled, but standing in the Parliament of Destiny, the chairman standing below the high platform at this moment was unmoved. Go! Behind the figure on the high platform, the speaker of Destiny softly issued an order. The instant the roar that was filled with slaughter rang out, the stars lit up once again and joined the galaxy that stretched across the sky, becoming a part of it. The sudden shrill alarm woke up Talia, who had just fallen asleep. What happened? After quickly putting on her clothes, Talia casually connected to the bridge. It's them. It's an emergency communication from Knight K. He seems to have found something. On the communication screen, Arthur hesitated for a moment and finally explained the general situation. According to the shared information sent by the Throne of Command, it seems that a space station has been found on the back of the Earth. Space station. Talia was taken aback and said casually, I'll come to the bridge right away. Prepare the explanation. However, before Talia could step out of the room, Arthur's voice rang out once more. Captain, according to the information from the Minerva, that space station is likely to be Obu's space station, Pillar of Heaven. Chapter 826. Since time immemorial, whenever humans looked up at the resplendent starry sky above their heads, some would be surprised, some would be hesitant, some would be lost, and some would even fear the resplendent starry sky and the pitch-black space behind it. Even though at some point in human history, humans had the ability to build castles and fortresses that allowed humans to gain a foothold in this resplendent starry sky, there were still people who were afraid of this starry sky. However, as a woman who had inherited the will of the Sahak family, these fears were just obstacles to her journey towards the ideal place of the Sahak family, obstacles that she had to overcome. Even though the heavenly defense pillar was now caught in an unknown disaster and lost in the endless dark void. Lady Mina, the engineering department has just completed an emergency repair of the spatial positioning system. The maid, who looked tired but still kept her back straight, softly reported the accident that had happened to the heavenly defense pillar. Is that so? Then, Where's the heavenly defense pillar? The transparent floor-to-ceiling window reflected the figure of a woman in a luxurious dress. Her posture was straight, and her face was full of heroic spirit. She was the owner of the heavenly defense pillar, and also the woman who had inherited the will of the Sahak family. Lun minus Sahak. The maid raised her head slightly and looked forward. She wasn't looking at me, nah. Instead, she was looking at the pitch-black void that Mina was staring at. As Mina's confidant, not long ago, she had stood here and witnessed with Mina the scene outside the window that had suddenly turned from pitch-black to a chaotic, multicolored, and bizarre scene. Although, the strange scene did not last long in the maid's eyes. But what followed was the terrifying news that the various instruments on the heavenly defense pillar had all stopped working. In the red light that represented danger, the calm and composed Mina immediately calmed her subordinates and ordered the engineering department to seize the time and prioritize the repair of the instruments that had been damaged for unknown reasons. Apart from that, the more terrifying news was that the defensive power of the heavenly defense pillar had been mostly destroyed in this strange change. Now, with the engineering department seizing the time to repair the various functions of the heavenly defense pillar, the only defensive power that could be used, other than a few heretics, was the golden heretic that was specially built for Lun minus Sahak. It was also the heavenly defense pillar, the symbol of the Sahak family's power, the heavenly defense pillar, the golden heretic, Heaven Mina. Of course, this absent-mindedness only lasted for a moment. The maid knew Mina's style very well. If he made a mistake at such a critical juncture, he would definitely be scolded or even punished by Mina. Perhaps Mina was too concerned about the situation in the pitch-black void outside. Or perhaps Mina's patience hadn't reached its limit yet. The maid quickly calmed herself down and reported the reports submitted by the engineering department one by one. Lady Mina, according to the repair results from the engineering department, our pillar of heaven's defense was above the synchronous orbit before it was accidentally discovered. But now, according to the results of the repaired positioning system, the pillar of heaven's defense seems to have risen above the remote orbit. Remote Earth orbit? Hearing the maid's report, Mina frowned slightly. In that case, are we still inside the Earth circle? The bizarre scene just now hadn't disappeared from Mina's mind. Mina's intuition told her that those messy things weren't as simple as throwing the pillar of heaven's defense from the synchronous orbit to the remote orbit. Especially before the mutation happened. After the Battle of Yajin Darai, Mina had been living in seclusion in the pillar of heaven's defense, quietly observing the changes in the world. The scene she witnessed made her firmly believe that all the mutations suffered by the pillar of heaven's defense couldn't be described as simple as an accident. While thinking, the pitch-black space outside the window suddenly lit up with a blue light. It was as if something was refracting the light from the depths of the void. The next moment, an azure planet slowly appeared from below. From bottom to top, it slowly streaked past Mina's eyes until it disappeared above. Earth. At this moment, the maid seemed to have heard Mina's sigh. It was as if she was sure, but it was also as if she was relieved. Inform everyone. Prepare for level 1 battle. The maid was taken aback, but she still responded quickly and decisively turned around to convey Mina's order. Behind the maid's departing figure was Mina's eyes, which shone with a resolute light. Is it the work of those mutant insects? If that's the case, Dilandar's plan will probably succeed. On the other side of the Earth, a tense atmosphere filled the huge satellite fortress's throne of command. Not long ago, the intelligence sent back by the reconnaissance drones sent by Sharon while tracking the retreating Beta confused Ray Minkai and the others. Could it be that these things will appear in this world like a random refresh? A stream of light flashed, and Mimi's figure appeared in the command center of the throne of command, causing Talia and the others to raise their eyebrows. This is? Captain Talia Karates. Nice to see you. What surprised Talia even more was that as soon as Mimi saw her, she greeted her as if they were close friends. Seeing how familiar they were, Talia couldn't help but wonder if she had forgotten something. Ray Minkai, who saw all this, coughed and interrupted Mimi's friendly greeting. Himimi, it seems that you have come to a conclusion. Himimi and her sister were assisting with the transformation project of the son of Dan Nu and could not enter space immediately. But even so, Ray Minkai still felt that this senior, who was more experienced in space travel, would have a better opinion. Yeah, something like that. Himimi nodded. Now this world has indeed begun to merge with other worlds. Although we don't know what the Destiny Council is using to realize such a huge plan, the current situation may be described as space drift. Space drift? Lei Minkai furrowed his brows. Similar to a message in a bottle? Well, yes and no. Himimi looked at Talia and the others. We already know about the Minerva. The appearance of the Minerva, in our opinion, is not an isolated event. It is a precursor to a large-scale space fusion event. Space fusion? This new term was keenly captured by Ray Minkai. Yes, you can understand it as a prelude to the fusion of worlds. Himimi spread out her hands and gestured. For example, this is a sudden fusion of two different worlds. However, in reality, the fusion between worlds was not as simple as it seemed. Instead, there was a process that needed to be gone through. These processes are called space fusion. Ray Minkai pondered for a moment, trying to understand Himimi's meaning. For example, just like the fusion between galaxies, first, the cantilevers between galaxies begin to contact and merge, then gradually develop into the interior of the galaxy vortex. And finally, the fusion between the supermassive black holes between the two galaxies. Snap! Himimi snapped her fingers. More or less. But there are differences in the details. The difference between worlds will bring about some unexpected changes. And these changes cannot be understood with a common-sense framework for the time being. But the appearance of the Minerva is lucky. Lucky. Talia, who had been listening for a long time, was still a little confused. She realized that she could not seem to understand the conversation between Ray Minkai and Himimi. Yes, the Minerva is lucky, because you are in the critical period of space fusion. So, you were able to silently merge into this world. It's like a drop of water with different colors falling into the blue sea. Although it's conspicuous, it quickly disappears without a trace. Himimi gestured with her hand and continued to speak. So, after the Minerva, a second drop of water appeared. Are you talking about the Pillar of Heaven? Ray Minkai paused and asked again. According to this theory, after the Minerva and the Pillar of Heaven, won't there be other related objects, people, or even an entire country that will appear? For example, Ray Minkai glanced at Talia. Zaft. Plant. Very likely. I once heard Grandpa say that he had experienced something similar. The person Himimi called Grandpa was the old man Ray Minkai had met before, the old man known as Venerable Dongfang. Dongfang Booby. Suddenly, Himimi turned around and looked to the right. That was not where Ray Minkai and Talia could see, because the holographic projection range was just enough to cover Himimi. Is that so? I see. The next moment, when Himimi turned around again, she brought with her a news that was neither good nor bad. It seems that our guess was correct. Now, the Minerva, the Pillar of Heaven, and even the Empire's surveillance drone cluster found the islands near the South Pacific Ocean are symbols of space fusion. Wait, islands in the South Pacific Ocean? When did this happen? It was just discovered. I didn't have time to inform you. K. Beside Himimi, Sharon's figure also appeared in a flash of light. This is the report from the surveillance drone cluster sent by the Empire. Originally, this drone cluster was responsible for searching for traces of Hive around the Empire, but they didn't expect to find these islands. Ray Minkai looked at the photos sent by Sharon, went silent for a moment, and then looked at Talia. Captain Talia, look at these islands. Talia did not doubt him, but after taking a closer look, she cried out in surprise. This is Aubrey. Yes, it is indeed Aubrey. Ray Minkai, who had stayed in Aubrey for a period of time, was very clear about Aubrey's environment. Has the Empire already made contact with that side? Sharon shook her head, but did not answer Ray Minkai. Let me answer this question. Although the Empire's drones found these islands, there seems to be an unknown force field around these islands. There is no way to get in contact with them, and there is no way to even get close. Himimi raised her right hand and sent several photos she just received to Ray Minkai. The photos were of several drones falling to the ground, and in front of the photos was a layer of unknown force field that only showed a faint shadow after the drones hit it. Looks like there are a lot of mysteries in this world. Then, the only thing we can contact next is the Pillar of Heaven? Indeed, Himimi shrugged. Chapter 827. In the void, alien insects swarm from all directions to the lonely orbital space station suspended in the void like a swarm of ants. The alien insects, waving their tentacles, opened their terrifying mouthparts from time to time, as if calling the same kind around them to join forces and head toward the orbital space station built by humans called the Pillar of Heaven. In the middle of the strange insect army that was like a dark cloud, bright lights would burst out from time to time. It's the brilliance of a killing weapon built by humans when it kills the enemy. In the dense army of alien insects with all kinds of ferocious and terrifying faces, the moment a cold sword light appeared, dozens of alien insects were chopped into pieces. The moment the large and small alien insects were smashed into pieces was the moment the blade that slashed down from the sky was dyed red with blood. Between the floating remains of the alien insects, the terrifying 150-meter-long blade was slowly retracting. Law, don't go too deep. I don't know when the disgusting big eyeball will run out of these insects. Although your big guy is very powerful, the attack of those big eyeballs is impossible to guard against. As the screen in front of him flashed, the head of a tired girl with orange-yellow hair casually tied into a ponytail appeared on it, and at the same time, her warning came. Oomph, I know. But as long as I'm entangled with those insects, the disgusting big eyeball may not attack me. The pilot driving the terrifying body with a 150-meter-long blade was not someone else, but Law from the recycling house. No, Miss Yamamoto is right. Law, don't be careless. At this time, a series of flames erupted from the lower left, and a blue body that abandoned the empty missile clips on its shoulders and legs rushed to the side of the huge body driven by Law. Song Yin Xiao, you're here. The person who came could be said to be an old acquaintance. Song Yin Xiao and his exclusive landline, Lon Heighton. Well, just in time to repel a wave of attack from the alien insects. Now I'll cover you. Behind the brown sunglasses was a pair of calm eyes. Song Yunda looked at the insects that were initially killed by the 150-meter-long blade, Kikuikamanji. Then, he took the opportunity to chase after them and killed more than half of them. Seeing that they were gathering again, he immediately called Law to follow and break through the encirclement together. It was already the first hour of the battle. Not to mention the blue heretic, even the strengthened, load-bearing outer armor that Law had specially built to allow the red heretic to use the 150-meter-long blade, Kikuikamanji, would not be able to last much longer. After all, compared to the agile and small blue heresy, the red heresy, which was equipped with a 60-meter-tall reinforced load-bearing outer armor, was an extremely conspicuous target. If it were not for the 150 Kikuikamanji that it was equipped with, the huge red heretic would have been smashed into pieces by the alien insects that relied on sharp armor to attack their targets. Lua was also aware of this. Knowing the danger of being surrounded by alien insects again, Law immediately piloted the love machine and followed closely behind the blue heresy. At the same time, Law no longer restrained the consumption of ammunition. He decisively emptied the many additional missiles that were mounted on the reinforced load-bearing outer armor before the attack. He imitated Song Yunda and threw out the empty missile compartments in one breath and activated the self-destruction program on them. Relying on the impact of the self-destruction of these missile compartments, he tried to delay the encirclement speed of the alien insects as much as possible. Boom, boom, boom. In front of him, it was the sound of the Blue Heresy's M68 Gold Leopard triple-headed short-range missile launchers that it was equipped with. Facing the explosion of 3 consecutive missiles that accurately hit the target, Song Yunda drove the Blue Heresy into the encirclement without hesitation. Law's red heresy followed closely behind. In the next second, the red heresy was shrouded in thick smoke mixed with some wreckage. The moment the huge red heresy pushed aside the thick smoke, it saw the blue heresy wielding the beam sword in its hand and forcibly piercing through a huge alien insect with sharp horns. Law, move quickly. Since then, the live ammunition weapons carried by the blue heresy were all used up, leaving only the beam rifle and the beam sword in its hand. Understood. After Law responded, a trace of struggle flashed across his face, as if he was hesitating about something. But in the blink of an eye, Law's expression returned to calmness, and his hands quickly pressed several buttons. Sorry, Kikuikamanji. Now, we have to separate for a while. Immediately afterward, Law said in a hoarse voice, Little Hachi, while disconnecting the reinforced load-bearing outer armor and the red heresy, activate the self-destruction program. Law's AI assistant, Little Hachi, responded and added, Trace program activated. Law, if the Kikuikamanji was not affected by the self-destruction of the reinforced load-bearing outer armor, we can find it after the battle. When Law heard this, he showed a surprised expression. Can you do it? Well, according to theory and calculations, the strength of the Kikuikamanji is enough to defend against the self-destruction of the reinforced load-bearing outer armor. Law, what are you waiting for? The insects are surrounding us. Before the surprised Law and Little Hachi could exchange a few words, Song Yunxiao's urging interrupted the conversation between one person and one machine. Okay, Little Hachi, let's start. Understood. The moment when the violent tremors spread all over the red heresy, it was the moment when the reinforced load-bearing outer armor was fully powered. At the same time, the locking mechanisms that connected the red heresy and the reinforced load-bearing armor opened one after another and turned into automatic control mode. Under Law's control, the red heresy pressed its backhand hard, and the entire body flipped over and jumped behind the reinforced load-bearing outer armor. Sorry, partner. See you later. The second after the red and blue streams of light converged, the reinforced load-bearing outer armor plunged into the insect army that was about to close in and exploded. Boom! The huge, explosive energy wantonly washed over the insect army that was about to close in, and the ferocious bodies that lacked protection were all blown into powder. Even the giant insect that used terrible sharp horns to attack the target could not escape death under this self-destruction. The closing of the insect army was interrupted. A way out. At this moment, it was also displayed in front of Song Yunxiao and Law. The two of them did not dare to delay, and immediately drove the beloved machine that had almost reached its limit into the thick smoke mixed with wreckage. Behind the thick smoke was the direction of the Pillar of Heaven. However, this battle was still far from reaching the stage of battle. Even though Law and Song Yunxiao relied on their excellent strength and the machine to delay and repel the attack of the insect army again and again, there was always a time when human strength was exhausted. Especially when facing the seemingly endless insect army, Law and Song Yunxiao's spirit and physical strength, the armor, ammunition, and parts of the red heresy and blue heresy were constantly being consumed, like a human being who was swept up by a whirlpool and watched himself being swallowed by the whirlpool step by step. They struggled hard, but it was in vain. Master Mina, Law from the recycling house, and Song Yunxiao from the giant snake tail have returned. Is that so? They must have consumed a lot of energy, right? Mina's eyes never left the void outside the window. From being completely empty to being covered in strange insects. Mina saw the changes one by one. The maid hesitated for a moment, but still responded. Yes, the huge outer armor of the recycling house seems to have severely injured the insect by self-destructing. Self-destructing? Is it the outer armor that was built to use that huge blade? Mina furrowed her brows slightly, but then relaxed them. Fine, go, I prepare. Next, it's our time. An hour ago, when the insect attacked, the team led by Law's recycling house and Song Yunxiao's giant snake tail rushed to the front. Now, it was the turn of the Pillar of Heaven to appear. Among them, The existence that stood at the top of the pillar of heaven's combat strength was Lund minus a hawk, and the golden heresy mina he piloted. Therefore, the battle was far from over. Time returned to the moment when the insect attacked and dragged the pillar of heaven into the battle. That was also the moment when Law and Song Yunxiao piloted their respective machines to fight the insect. Amidst the fierce battle, there were many pairs of eyes hidden in the darkness that were watching the battlefield. That's the recycling house and the giant snaketail. Looking at the two machines besieged by the insect, no, to be precise, the Beta army, Ray Minkai almost instantly confirmed the identity of the other party. La Jewel, Song Yunxiao, a familiar person and a familiar machine. The details that were slightly different from what Lei Minkai remembered told Lei Minkai that the Pillar of Heaven's defense that suddenly appeared was most likely the woman he knew. The Pillar of Heaven's defense commanded by Lun Minasahak. Kai, the preparations are complete. When Lakis's voice came, Ray Minkai realized that his thoughts seemed to have been seen through by Lakis. Lux, what if the Lund Minasahak in the Pillar of Heaven's ward isn't the person we know? This, I don't know either, but we'll only know the answer when we get there and see it. Lakis smiled gently, stepped forward, stood beside Ray Minkai, and looked at the battlefield far away on the other side of the earth. That's true. Ray Minkai shook his head and sighed. It seems that I'm a little stubborn. In fact, whether it's the Lund minus a hawk we know or not, as long as the truth is in front of her, I believe Lund minus a hawk will make the best choice. Yes. Then I'm going. Captain Talia and Dr. Celine, I'll leave it to you. Lakis, leave it to me. Kai, I also want to know about Plant after we leave. Lakis nodded and looked at the void with a trace of nostalgia. I wonder if something will happen to Plant after that. Maybe. However, from the performance of the Minerva and Captain Talia, Plant, and even Zaft seem to have become somewhat different from the Plant and Zaft we know of. That's true. Chapter 828. It was night. The starry sky was dazzling and intoxicating. But among the many eyes that stared at the starry sky, there was a pair of eyes that hid the uneasiness very well. At this moment, this pair of eyes was really staring at the night sky to the west. There, an extremely bright star that was unfamiliar to this starry sky and did not conform to any records of the star chart left in human history was hanging in the sky. Your Majesty, this is the last document for today. Veretta Nu, who was wearing a female official uniform, gently placed the last document in her arms on the desk and softly reminded. The left and right sides of the room were already filled with all kinds of signed documents. Well, put it there. I'll take care of it later. Veretta, you're tired too. Go and rest. Her Majesty, who stood by the window and looked up at the starry sky, did not look back. She just gave an order and ignored Veretta. On the other hand, when Veretta noticed that the Empress of the Britannia Empire, Her Majesty Euphemia, was looking up at the starry sky, she could not help but look at the sky to the west, the star hanging high in the sky. That was the star that symbolized the imperial power of the Britannia Empire. It was a satellite fortress called the Throne of Command. It was also the space frontline base where Ray Minkai was located. Your Majesty, His Highness will definitely return triumphantly. After all, that's the name of His Highness. When she heard Veretta's words, Euphemia smiled and then looked back at the brown beauty who took over the position of clerk after Ethelum followed Ray Minkai to the Throne of Command. Speaking of which, Veretta, you have a lot of trust in Minkai. This seemingly unintentional sentence made Veretta blush. Fortunately, after Euphemia made fun of Veretta, she did not continue to tease Veretta, because a bright light suddenly streaked across the night sky. A meteor? No, that was not a meteor. Earlier, it was a battle plan that Ray Minkai reported through the Empire's secret channel. That was the battle plan that Ray Minkai jokingly called floating on water. It was a high-speed spaceship designed and manufactured by the Throne of Command's powerful production line. It was a battle plan beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Your Majesty. I know. That was the signal for Minkai to start. In the night sky, as the meteor streaked across the sky, the second, third, and more meteors appeared. The Empress turned back to her desk and raised her hand to open the last document. A line of words on the title page was reflected in Euphemia's eyes. A small number of cases with unknown symptoms were reported in the north of the empire. Valletta, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you again tonight. Valletta bowed and replied, No, it's my honor. In addition, when your Highness set out for the expedition, your Highness also instructed me to assist your Majesty in 100% condition. Is that so? Thank you for your hard work. At this moment, the night sky was full of meteors. It was exceptionally beautiful and spectacular. Rumble, the roar was endless. At the same time, in the rumbling, there was a violent tremor like a tide. Of course, this was an inevitable process. Any object that wanted to enter the atmosphere from space must experience the hot baptism of the atmosphere. In front of her was the crimson fire that constantly swept past the porthole. The environment in the cabin was simple, but it could meet the needs of human beings. Real Flying Bird closed her eyes and tried to stabilize her mind as much as possible to prevent this somewhat nervous mood from affecting the development of the follow-up plan. Real, are you nervous? Unlike Real Flying Bird's nervousness, the blond boy sitting on the left was much calmer. He was so calm that he could even hold a book and read it. As a good friend of the blond boy, Real Flying Bird couldn't help but wonder if her friend was too calm. One must know that this was not an ordinary battle plan. Ray, can you read it now? The content of the book. The person who asked this question on behalf of Real Flying Bird was the girl who looked a little panicked, but she was forcing herself to be calm. Luna Maria Hawk. Is there a problem? The content of this book is not bad. The blond boy who was being stared at by his companion raised his gaze, smiled slightly, closed the book, and continued to say, Luna Maria, although I don't expect you to be able to do it to my level, at least you should maintain the most basic calmness like Real Flying Bird. Luna Maria opened her mouth, glanced at Real Flying Bird, and couldn't help but mutter, Can you blame me for this? Isn't it because this battle plan is too crazy? Crazy? How? The sudden voice made Luna Maria's body tremble, and her expression became flustered on the spot. Calm down, Luna Maria Hawk. Although this ship is an emergency supply, its performance and strength can be guaranteed. When the white mask appeared in front of the trio, Ray Minkai's voice also sounded. Your Excellency, sorry for making you laugh. The blond boy, Reza Beryl, said apologetically. No, you don't have to. After all, this plan is indeed a bit crazy, as Luna Maria said. Ray Minkai smiled and glanced at Luna Maria, who was pretending to be calm, Real Flying Bird, who was still able to remain calm, and Lei, who was too calm. I believe that in the many battles recorded in the Zaf Military Academy, there has never been such a crazy plan. With the shuttle urgently manufactured from the production line of the Throne of Command as the main body, it carried the assault team consisting of Ray Minkai, Lei, Real, and Luna Maria. Starting from the Throne of Command, it accelerated all the way and rushed into the atmosphere at a very fast speed. At the same time, it used the characteristics of the atmosphere to perform atmospheric braking and rush to the back of the Earth in one breath. In other words, in a short period of time, they rushed to the back of the Earth where the Pillar of Heaven was located and began to support it. Although it sounded easy, in fact it was thrilling. The slightest carelessness may lead to the destruction of the ship. Of course, this kind of thing will not happen. Okay, 1 minute left before departure from orbit. Please be prepared. Sharon's reminder came from the headset. I know. Then let's begin. Ray Minkai nodded and turned to look at the trio. Level 1, combat state. Everyone board? Yes. At this moment, the trio responded in unison and followed Ray Minkai into the Naku. The battle was still ongoing. This was already the third wave of attack from the alien insects. The first wave of attack was repelled by the combat power represented by Law and Songyanshio. The second wave of attack was repelled by the defense force of the Pillar of Heaven itself, led by Lund, Mina, Sahak. But no matter how hard the Pillar of Heaven tried to cause great losses to the alien insect army in these two attacks, the alien insects could once again swarm towards the Pillar of Heaven in the next attack. Minasama, the ammunition reserve of the Pillar of Heaven has dropped to 50%. If this continues, I'm afraid we won't be able to hold on. In the space battlefield between the humans and the alien insects, every time the golden stream of light flashed, it was the moment when an alien insect was crushed. But no matter how the terrifying alien insects in front of them were wiped out by Lun Mina, it could not improve the situation of the Pillar of Heaven at all. The speed of the enemy's growth was getting longer and longer. From the beginning of the battle until now, the firepower support provided by the Pillar of Heaven was gradually reaching its limit. The reinforcements represented by Law and Song Yunxiu had also suffered great losses. If this continued, the Heavenly Pillar's fate would most likely come to an end in the fourth, or even the fifth wave of attacks after repelling the alien insects. What should I do? Options kept flashing through Mina's mind, but they were of no help to the current predicament. Alien insects. This race that had appeared as the enemy of humanity since the outbreak of the X-1 rift had destroyed most of humanity's defense forces in half a year. The insufferably arrogant Atlantic Alliance that manipulated the Earth Alliance and even launched a war against Plant had lost half of its territory and was in imminent danger. The Eurasian Federation that followed behind the Atlantic Alliance and stirred up trouble was not so lucky. Starting from the southern tip of Africa, all the way north, all the territory south of the Mediterranean Sea had fallen. From the moment these territories fell, the humans in the fallen areas had all become the souls of the dead at the hands of this foreign race. Now, was the Pillar of Heaven also going to be a part of the fallen? No, I will never allow such a thing to happen. Even as she coldly observed the changes in the world, Mina was not doing nothing. Instead, she had secretly gathered the citizens of Aubrey who had been forced to leave their homes due to the war, gathering them into the Heavenly Ward Pillar to provide protection for them. Therefore, victory was a must. Tian Mina's 3 horns, modified attack shield system, fired all 3 ultra-high-speed kinetic energy armor-piercing projectiles in one breath and directly punched 3 large holes in the horns of the large alien insect blocking in front of her, forcibly stopping the insect's attempt to disperse Tian Mina with its high speed. Immediately after, Mina, who had gained the upper hand, pulled slightly with her right hand. The 3 horns, modified attack shield system of the metal alien sky. Mina's 3 horns, modified attack shield system, burst out with a brilliant light. Following the movement of the steel arm, it easily pierced through the holes made by the ultra-high-speed kinetic energy armor-piercing projectiles and accelerated backward. At this moment, Mina might feel that the silent vacuum seemed to be a blessing, because the sound of the alien insect being cut open by the 3 horns. Modified attack shield system's beam sword did not reach the cockpit, and even the slight vibration was absorbed and offset by Tian Mina's excellent buffer equipment. All of this was just like playing a video game. However, in fact, the situation did not change because of this. Woo 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 woo. The ear-piercing alarm of the radar suddenly sounded. It was the alarm that detected a super high-speed object entering the void battlefield where the Pillar of Heaven was located. Report the situation. Before the report from the Pillar of Heaven could be heard, the battlefield between the humans and the alien insects changed abruptly. On the battlefield filled with the alien insect army, several rays of light suddenly lit up, bright and straight, like a 3-year-old child playing with glass beads, from far to near, all the way to the place where the alien insect army was the most concentrated. Chapter 829. Tremor. Boom. When the 2 became the main melody at this moment, everyone had already boarded their own beloved aircraft, waiting for the moment to attack. The external communication connected to the spaceship was also faithfully broadcasting the entire process of the wind from the other side of the Earth to the back of the Earth. Distance, 3,500. All attention. Start the countdown. This was the fleet of spaceships that set off from the throne, completed the critical flight, and successfully arrived at the back of the Earth. Number 10. However, these 10 spaceships were not personally controlled by humans. Instead, they were controlled by the AI Sharon, who had super high computing power. With the support of its huge and accurate computing power, this extremely dangerous critical flight ushered in the moment of completion. Sharon, after the attack, I will pilot Lancelot, Sword of the King, to attract the enemy's attention. You will guide Real Flying Bird, Reza Barrel, and Luna Maria Hawk to escort the remaining spaceships into the Pillar of Heaven. The spaceship that Ray Minkai and the others were in was the only spaceship with people in this fleet. Other than being controlled by Sharon, the rest of the spaceships were loaded with the Freya weapons that were accumulated by the throne of the Freya after the self-cultivation Azir and Nina offered Freya to the Empire. It had to be said that in the current situation where the throne of the Empire could not support this operation with super long-range main cannons, these Freya weapons were probably the most powerful trump card in Ray Minkai's hands. Therefore, the moment the countdown to the attack reached 0, the first batch of Freya weapons was accompanied by Lancelot, Sword of the King's attack group. Understood. Distance 1500, target locked. The countdown to the attack has reached 0. Sharon ordered. The first batch of Freya attack group, launch. The moment when the 12 flames appeared from the shadow of the back of the earth was the moment when Ray Minkai attacked. Lancelot, Sword of the King, attack. Bright light wings stretched out from the open hatch, and the surging energy gave Lancelot, Sword of the King's powerful mobility. With just a light jump, Lancelot, Sword of the King arrived first, passing the spaceship and catching up with the first batch of Freya weapons. Reza Barrel, your mission is to escort the remaining ships into the Pillar of Heaven's defense. Of course, the other party won't easily trust you. How to complete the mission is up to you. Although this attack was to support Heaven's Pillar, Ray Minkai hadn't taken the initiative to reveal his identity, so this attack was a one-sided action. Heaven's Pillar side probably didn't know that there would be reinforcements with 9 spaceships fully loaded with Freya weapons. Understood. Ray didn't talk nonsense. He nodded and immediately began to assign tasks. Luna Maria, send a communication request to Heavenly Defense Pillar. Use the Minerva's communication code? Or should I say? Luna Maria was stunned. She was a little confused. Stupid Luna Maria. We can just announce our identities to the public. If that's still Aubrey's Pillar of Heaven. Real Flying Bird first scolded Luna Maria with a smile, and then a trace of worry flashed in her eyes, as well as a trace of sadness. However, whether it was Ray or Luna Maria, none of them noticed the difference in Real Flying Bird. As for Ray Minkai, after he gave the order to Ray, he no longer paid attention to the trio's movements. An unknown body has been detected ahead. It's in a fierce battle with the Beta. Immediately afterward, Sharon placed the detected unknown target on the screen. Ray Minkai recognized the unknown body mentioned by Sharon at a glance. Gold Sky Mina? It seems that our luck isn't bad. Ray Minkai's eyes narrowed, and his hand movements paused. Lancelot King's sword slightly folded its light wings, took the initiative to slow down, and broke away from the first batch of Freya weapons attack trajectory. This was an extremely ordinary greeting. This time, 12 brilliant rays of light instantly opened up a huge gap in the middle of the Beta army, as the main greeting was the terrifying momentum. Amidst the dazzling radiance, Jean Yaduanshan Mina stood quietly on the wreckage of a battering Ram Beta that had half of its body cut off. It appeared to be in awe, but at the same time, it appeared to be puzzled by the scene before it. In the blink of an eye, nearly 1/3 of the Beta army that made the Pillar of Heaven suffer was obliterated. No matter how Mina guessed, she could not see through the truth of the scene in front of her. This is Night K. Gold Sky Machine. Please answer if you receive this. The answer was revealed at this moment. Night K. This codename immediately aroused Mina's memories. In her impression, only one man would use such a codename. K. Brittany? I didn't expect that at this moment of reunion, you would still use such an old-fashioned codename. Your Excellency Kai Britannia. Without any hesitation, as the memories of the past surfaced in her mind, Mina revealed the truth behind this sudden communication. Hee hee. I didn't expect Lord Lund, Mina Sahak's eyes, to be so sharp that you recognized me immediately. Ray Minkai chuckled, and Lancelot King's sword passed through the countless wreckage of the beta and arrived in front of Gold Sky Mina. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was deliberate. As soon as the explosion of the first batch of Freya weapons faded, the second batch of 10 Freya weapons exploded. The dazzling brilliance was like a slowly rising sun, dispelling all the darkness at this moment. It also stretched the shadow of Lancelot King's sword's body extremely long, covering most of Goldsky Mina. That body, the pure white body, decorated with golden carvings, the unfamiliar body that looked particularly sacred as a whole, stunned Mina. That was not Zaft, nor was it an airframe that could be produced by the Earth United. From the design style to the pair of extremely impactful light wings, it reminded Mina of this moment all the time. I didn't expect that His Excellency Knight, who had been missing for a long time, would still be able to cause such a big commotion when he reappeared. Mina, who quickly calmed down, glanced at the alien insect, Beta, army that had been easily wiped out, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. No, this is just a little trick. The attack of the Freya weapons was surprisingly effective. Ray Minkai, who had thought that there would be a big battle, found that he was just going through the motions in the end. Little trick? Mina raised her eyebrows. If this is considered a little trick, then the Earth United would probably want to master all these little tricks in their hands. When Ray Minkai heard this, he felt that there was a hidden meaning in Mina's words. After all, this was still a battlefield, and there was no room for distraction. But in the next second, the Beta army that was attacking the Pillar of Heaven unexpectedly retreated and accelerated away from the Pillar of Heaven in groups. Even if they were chased and killed by the MS that belonged to the Pillar of Heaven in the process of retreating, these ferocious monsters could not turn back to bite and attack humans. Sharon, stop the attack. As soon as he discovered the movement of the Beta army, Ray Minkai immediately issued an order to stop the attack. Understood. All detection units immediately lock onto the target, activate the tracking module, and carefully search for changes in the surrounding space. Sharon understood what Ray Minkai meant. It was nothing more than a repeat of the previous scene. If the Beta army retreated while the Hive was still there might be unusual changes behind it. In that case, grasping this unusual change would be the solution to the current predicament. As long as they could find the hidden Hive and destroy it, no matter how many Beta players there were around them, they would become headless flies that could not find their way around. They would be at the mercy of the enemy. Of course, it was also impossible to rule out the possibility that there might be other Hive in the farther and more distant universe, or even on the Earth's surface, and could affect the Beta operations in the universe. It's over. Just as she was about to make a big move and cover the remaining spaceships to enter the Pillar of Heaven, Luna Maria found that the Beta army that had surrounded the Pillar of Heaven was actually fleeing under the attack of 2 batches of Freya armed forces. Such a drastic change made her almost unable to react. It seems that our luck is still a little better. Ray seemed relieved. However, in this tragic battlefield, the appearance of the spaceship formation led by the trio made the survivors of Pillar of Heaven unable to help but feel a glimmer of hope of survival when they saw the arrival of reinforcements after a bitter battle. It was too tragic. Even with excellent pilots such as Lund Mina Sahak, Law, and Song Yin-hai fighting on the front line, the losses suffered by the Pillar of Heaven were already serious. The closer they got to the Pillar of Heaven, the more they could see the broken bodies mixed with the corpses of the Beta. Especially in the final defense circle of the Pillar of Heaven, it was almost the wreckage of the heresy produced by Ob that was broken and blown up. From the wreckage, they could even see a trace of debris floating out of the broken cockpit, as well as blood. This space station is about to end. Looking at the wreckage of a heresy floating in front of him, Ray saw a face that had lost its life and died in pain and distortion from the wreckage that was obviously the torso. Then, didn't we come all the way here for nothing? Real Flying Bird opened his mouth and muttered to himself. Then, he seemed to suddenly remember something. Right? When Minerva was sailing, I heard a rumor. It seems that there's a space station that is recruiting the people of Ob scattered all over the world. Could it be real? Are you talking about the rumored Pillar of Heaven? Obviously, Luna Maria had also heard of that rumor. It seems so. Above, Jean Yuduanshan Mina and Lancelot King's sword were separated by 100 meters. Quietly watching the scene of the trio escorting the spaceship group into the Pillar of Heaven. What those spaceships are carrying, I'm afraid it's not a gift for a long separation, right? Mina said. No, it is indeed a gift. It's just that it's a gift for the beta. Ray Minkai replied. Beta? Hee hee. It seems that Sir Knight's experience has exceeded my imagination. Why don't we go back to the Pillar of Heaven and talk about it in detail? At the same time, we should also thank Sir Knight for coming to support the Pillar of Heaven. All right, I also want to ask the Patriarch something. Chapter 830. Alien Insects. No, the beta should have retreated. The alien insect army that overshadowed the Pillar of Heaven's defense in an arrogant manner finally retreated, leaving behind the wreckage of many heretics and a large number of alien insects that quietly surrounded the Pillar of Heaven's defense. This was a battle to the death after surviving a calamity. It was also a choice that was about to be faced with the Pillar of Heaven's defense and all the surviving humans on it. When the three Minerva escorted the fleet of spaceships slowly drove into the only port that was still intact, the survivors on the Pillar of Heaven's defense could not help but feel a trace of relief, a trace of excitement, but also a trace of confusion. For the Pillar of Heaven's defense, it might be in urgent need of supplies. But more importantly, there was a lack of combat power. Before Ray Minkai and the three Minerva arrived here, the intensity of the battle had almost spread to the Pillar of Heaven's defense itself. As long as time went a little further, the Pillar of Heaven's defense itself would definitely be landed by those disgusting and terrifying alien insects. At that time, even if there was still a group of combat forces led by Lun Mina Sahak, the consequences would be unimaginable. Thank you. Seeing the fleet of spaceships completely docked at the port, Mina thanked him again. Master, you've said thank you many times. Ray Minkai sighed helplessly. To be honest, the beta's retreat was beyond Ray Minkai's expectations. The moment they entered the battle, the Freya-armed Ray Minkai only fired 2 rounds. Although the effect was good, more than half of the beta army was still alive. No, this kindness is not something that can be erased with 1 or 2 thanks. In addition, Knight, you have been missing for so long. Why did you call me that? Mina saw Ray Minkai's doubts, but she did not choose to delve into it at this moment. Instead, she denied Ray Minkai's way of calling her. Ray Minkai paused for a moment, then sighed helplessly. Sorry, it's my negligence. Mina. Next, we have to have a good discussion. The alien insects, no, I am very interested in the beta you call them. Yes, that's for sure. In exchange, I hope to obtain information from you. After a pause, Ray Minkai added, all the information. Mina furrowed her brows slightly at this addition. Mina was aware of the mech that the trio was piloting, as well as the communication between them and the Pillar of Heaven's defense. She was also well aware of what the trio represented. While traveling together with the Minerva, no, at least at a moment when they were related to the Minerva, Ray Minkai actually made such a remark. Mina couldn't help but raise her spirits. Not long after parking their respective airframes on Neku's Pillars of Heaven, Ray Minkai was led by Mina to the office he was using. Don't worry. The 3 little fellows had already been arranged. My men will take them to rest. Although the Pillar of Heaven's defense isn't a good place, it can still serve Zaf soldiers. Ray Minkai smiled helplessly when he heard Mina mention the word Zaft. Trust me, it was an accident. An accident? An accident to be able to encounter the new battleship that Zaft and even that old Fox Dylandal values. Speaking of which, it's really interesting. Mina sighed, and her tone suddenly changed. Speaking of which, my appearance here is also an accident, right? Mina looked at Ray Minkai, as if she wanted to find the answer from Ray Minkai's expression. In fact, the DSSD research on the X1 crack also has the support of our Sahak family. Yes, yes, Dr. Celine also mentioned these things. In addition, Mina, what you guessed is correct. Ray Minkai went straight to the point and explained the general situation to Mina one by one. Mina, the world you and the Pillar of Heaven's defense are in is not the world you are familiar with half an hour later. Ray Minkai picked up the tea served by the maid and drank a few mouthfuls to moisten his throat. Although half an hour had passed, Ray Minkai only gave a general idea of the information he wanted to tell, and there were more details that he did not mention. On the other hand, Mina did not sit in her seat. Instead, she stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and silently looked at the void outside the window, where countless wreckages were floating, as well as the blue earth that appeared from time to time from the bottom left, quickly flashing across her vision and finally disappearing into the upper right corner. As expected, the D.S.S.D. doctors weren't wrong. Mina sighed faintly, and when she turned around again, her expression had become very serious. Now, it was Mina's turn to bring out the terms of an equal trade. Half a year? No. It should be me and the Pillar of Heaven's defense's time senses. The crisis in the X1 crack has already happened half a year ago. On a certain day, half a year ago, a magnetic field vibration caused by an unknown phenomenon suddenly occurred in the area at the front of the X1 crack where the DSSD is located. I'm not too sure what happened. Mina glanced at Ray Minkai and continued. But the moment the crisis broke out, the Earth Alliance's patrol fleet around the X1 crack was sunk in an instant. In an instant, Ray Minkai was a little surprised. According to the records on the Minerva, the Earth Alliance's patrol fleet was not instantly destroyed. Yes, in an instant. After the crisis completely broke out, the Earth Alliance at the Moon base found a clue from the last communication of the destroyed fleet. Those patrol fleets were wiped out by the alien insect army that rushed out of the X1 crack. After thinking about it, Mina decided to change the name of those alien insects. From information I've gathered, after those betas wiped out the Earth Alliance's space fleet around the X1 crack, they broke into Earth's atmosphere at the fastest speed and landed in Africa, Central America, and the east of the Mediterranean within 24 hours. In the following 24 hours, large-scale and tragic battles occurred in the areas where the betas landed. In a short period of time, the number of casualties, including local civilians, rose sharply. Did the Earth Alliance take any measures? Ray Minkai was very clear about the results of the betas landing. However, this was not the world where the MUVs existed, but a future world where human technology was more advanced than the MUVs. However, the answer surprised Ray Minkai. The Earth Alliance station there was completely wiped out. Central Africa fell 72 hours after the betas landed, and Central America fell 36 hours after the betas landed. As for the betas landing force east of the Mediterranean, they were cleared out by the East Asian Federation and the local Eurasian Federation garrison with overwhelming firepower as soon as they reacted. In the end, the Eurasian Federation lost the African region and the Victoria spaceport, as well as the Central American region, causing North and South America to lose contact. Ray Minkai's conclusion was not confirmed by Mina. No, the situation is worse than you think. Mina stretched out her finger and drew a few lines on the table. This is the African region of the Eurasian Federation. Before I and the Pillar of Heaven were involved in the accident, the entire region had already fallen. The situation in America is similar. Except for North America, where the Atlantic Federation is located, the central and southern parts of America have all fallen. And the Beta Army that captured the African region also tried to cross the Suez Canal and break into Central Asia, but they were once again stopped by the East Asian Federation and the local garrison, and they failed to succeed. Watching and listening to Mina tell him the information she had one by one, Ray Minkai gradually outlined a war situation map in his mind. In the big picture, the humans in this world were indeed doing better than the MUVs. Although they had lost the territory of 2 continents, the core area of human civilization was firmly in the hands of humans and had not been lost. After pondering for a moment, Ray Minkai set his eyes on a blueprint that he had never heard of. What about plant? Earth has already suffered such a disaster. Zaft, no. Ray Minkai shook his head and focused his attention on another place, another person. This was also the name he heard from Mina from the beginning. Gilbert Dylandel. Gilbert Dillondale, eh? That's really an old fox. Mina smiled coldly. The beta that rushed out of the X1 rift did indeed land on Earth immediately, but there is still a considerable number of beta in the universe. While they attacked Plant, they also attacked the moon base of the Earth Alliance. Fortunately, the universe battlefield is Zaft's home ground. Although the beta is terrifying, they were also wiped out by the miniaturized Genesis and became trash floating in the universe around Plant. After a pause, the smile on Mina's face became more and more sarcastic. This is undoubtedly a great victory. Compared to the continuous loss of territory by the Earth Alliance, they had to rely on natural terrain and huge manpower and material resources to stop the BTA army on the ground. Ray Minkai said without hesitation, "I'm afraid Dylandel won't let go of this opportunity." Mina closed her eyes and was silent for a moment. This made Ray Minkai a little puzzled, but he also secretly guessed that if Dylandel really wanted to use that great victory to build momentum, then there was only one possibility. Yes, Mina spoke again. From her reopened eyes, Ray Minkai saw a trace of unwillingness and even more anger. That's right. Mina's voice gradually became cold. While the Earth Alliance was under pressure to stop the Beta army, Gilbert Dylandel, who had won a great victory against the Beta in the universe battlefield, announced a plan. In order to prevent mankind, who had just stepped into the universe and had not yet had the time to go into the deep space, from being wiped out, and for mankind to be able to continue in the future disasters and obtain more opportunities to become stronger, Gilbert Dylandel, a geneticist, announced a human optimization iteration plan called Project Destiny. Project Destiny? At this moment, Ray Minkai almost jumped up. Yes, Project Destiny. Moreover, when Gilbert Dylandel announced the implementation of Project Destiny in the name of the future of mankind, the current Prime Minister of Aub, Kariura Ashar, also followed suit and announced that she would become the first member of Project Destiny. Chapter 831. Silence hung in the room for a long time. Ray Minkai had already gotten up and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked at the wreckage outside and the thruster fire that symbolized the battlefield cleanup team coming and going. He fell into silence. Mina, on the other hand, was much more relaxed. Perhaps it was the long-time pressure that was released through the exchange of information. Or perhaps it was because she had reunited with Ray Minkai after such a long time that she saw hope that Mina, as well as the people on the Pillars of Heaven's defense, could escape with their lives. Project Destiny. Ray Minkai let out a long sigh. I didn't expect Dillondar to take such a step. Moreover, I didn't expect Carrie to make such a decisive choice. In Ray Minkai's memory, the few times he had come face to face with the old fox, Dillondar, was no longer enough for Ray Minkai to make an effective judgment about Dillondar, who was able to carry out the fate plan with the help of the two crises brought about by the explosion of the X1 rift and the invasion of the Beta. Naturally, in Ray Minkai's more distant memory, the image of the character that he obtained from watching CD when he was young was also the same. To be honest, I'm not surprised by Dillondar's actions. However, Carrie's choice really surprised me. Mina got up and walked to Ray Minkai's side, looking at the void outside the window side by side with him. After the battle with Yakin Duway, although Carrie has matured a little and is able to take on the responsibilities of Prime Minister Aubrey on her own, but due to the influence of certain things, although the Ashar family is still at the peak of their power, their right to speak has begun to show signs of weakening. Mina paused, a trace of disdain flashing in her eyes. Especially the family of the boy who was engaged to Carrie when she was young, the Silent family. Taking advantage of the gap between Lord Ashar's death, they used the excuse of the future Prime Minister's fiancé to quietly transfer part of the Ashar family's power. This is not surprising. Ray Minkai nodded. Even without the memories of Aubrey's future in his previous life, Ray Minkai, as the Imperial Prince, could make a series of speculations based on what he saw with his own eyes. Yes, this was not surprising. However, what was unexpected was that when the X-1 rift broke out and the Beta invasion crisis broke out, after a series of terrible operations by the Earth Alliance, Carrie was able to make a decisive move. She took advantage of the fact that the Sealand family, who was secretly involved with the Atlantic Alliance, was in a state of panic and eliminated the entire Sealand family in one fell swoop. She listened to Myrna's description of Carrie. A hint of surprise flashed across Lei Mingkai's heart. If Mina's information was correct, Carly had become a ruthless character who could endure patiently and strike like a thunderbolt when she made a move. Surprised, isn't it? Back then, that innocent little girl who only knew how to make a ruckus and didn't know how much sacrifice Aubrey had made in secret in order to maintain that glamorous appearance would actually have such a day. Mina recalled her own expression of disbelief when her subordinates who were hiding in Aubrey's territory reported back that Carrie had acted decisively and eliminated the Sierra family. She could not help but sigh. Ray Minkai nodded slightly, feeling a little emotional. People always change. Then, does he know? During the offensive and defensive battle on Aubrey, Mina led her subordinates to capture the group of people who died for their country when Huey was about to self-destruct and did not have much defensive power. Their leader was Namiura Asha. That lord knows. After a pause, Mina revealed a secret. In fact, that lord and the other lords also settled in the Pillar of Heaven after the war. Right here. Ray Minkai was stunned. After the battle on Aubrey, Ray Minkai did not pay attention to where Mina would place Nami and the others. But he did not expect that Mina would be so bold as to place them in the Pillar of Heaven. In this regard, Mina did not explain much. After learning of Carrie's change, that lord stayed alone in his room, and after spending 3 days without eating or drinking, he took the initiative to request to settle in the Pillar of Heaven. Is that so? Ray Minkai changed the topic. So, he also knew about the battle just now? After all, it was a big commotion. It's hard to hide it. To be honest, at this time, I hope that Lord can take the initiative to step forward and help us appease the people of the Pillar of Heaven. Mina sighed, and her gaze fell on the monster remains floating around the Pillar of Heaven. In the end, it was not a battleship, nor an MS, nor a human that attacked the Pillar of Heaven. It was a monster beyond the understanding of today's humans. Your Excellency Knight, since you're here then, I won't hold back. I hope you can help me complete the final mission of the Pillar of Heaven. More than half of the not-so-spacious passage had been occupied by the injured. This was a helpless choice. The beds owned by the Celestial Defense Pillar had been occupied by the seriously injured since the invasion of the Beta. Those who were not seriously injured could only be arranged in the aisle, waiting for the next step after emergency bandaging. Even so, with the lack of medical personnel, these injured who were not prioritized could only be treated as much as possible with the help of a small number of nurses. Jeanne, the situation here is worse than we thought. The trio, who could not stay in the room, decided to go to Naku. When they were preparing their bodies, they were shocked by the crowded aisle in a short period of time. It seems that there is a shortage of manpower here. While Jean Fei Niao and Luna Maria were shocked by the current situation, Ray, who is usually calm, rolled up his sleeves and took the lead to walk to the nurse not far away. After exchanging a few words with her, he took the bandage and some medicine from her. Jeanne, Luna Maria, what are you still doing there? Come and help. The two of them were stunned. After looking at each other, they walked to Ray's side and took the bandage from his hand as they asked, Ray, aren't we going to prepare the body? Jean Fei glanced at the bandage in his hand. This was not a problem. When he was at Zaf Military Academy, he had received a tutorial on battlefield first aid. What made him puzzled was Ray's decision at this moment. We may not be able to stay here for long. Come and help. Ray did not say much. Instead, he urged Jean Fei Niao and Luna Maria to hurry up and help the busy nurses who were sweating profusely. Jean Fei Niao and Luna Maria looked at each other again. In the end, they still followed Ray's footsteps in confusion. In the depths of the corridor, in a certain ward, a group of middle-aged men in white coats were busy, sweating profusely. Their pure white lapels had long been stained red by the blood that spurted out from their wounds. In this regard, these middle-aged men did not care at all. Tommy, hemostatic forceps. Looking at the blood splattering from the broken arm, the middle-aged doctor, who was the chief surgeon, kept issuing instructions to the people who assisted him to provide assistance. However, among these instructions, a name was constantly mentioned, a name that was respected by everyone in Abu, the Abu Lion. In the attack and defense of Abu, the former Prime Minister, Tommy Ura Asha, who died for his country. After being busy for a few hours, he finally saved the MS pilot who was lying on the operating table with one foot in the door of death. The middle-aged doctor let out a long sigh of relief. As he took off his mask, he looked at the man who was standing at the side of the operating table and watching the MS pilot whose breathing gradually calmed down. "Sir Tommy, please rest assured. He has survived." "Yes, he survived." The tall figure swayed and seemed to be a little exhausted. The people around him were so scared that they went forward to support him. "No, don't worry about me. I'm just a little tired. Continue with the work at hand. Quick, there are still many injured people in urgent need of treatment." After the man pushed away the support of the people around him, he looked at the middle-aged doctor. "Doctor, how many people are there?" "There are still many. Although the 5 operating rooms here have been fully treated, the number of people is beyond our estimation. I'm afraid. There's no need to be afraid. Do your best to save lives." The man was stunned and finally shook his head with a bitter smile. "Please rest assured, Sir Tommy, we will definitely do our best to save our compatriots. Also, there is not enough oxygen left here. I hope Sir Tommy can mention this to Master Mina." The middle-aged doctor spread his hands helplessly. "Due to the previous battle, all the war supplies have been centralized. Therefore, I have to trouble Sir Tommy to come forward." The man glanced at the oxygen tank placed next to the operating table. It could only last for a few hours. After that, he nodded silently. The man who walked out of the operating room stood in front of the door and fell into silence. He knew that the so-called oxygen tank shortage was just a perfect excuse for the middle-aged doctor to let him off the stage smoothly. "Am I now just a useless old man?" The man laughed bitterly and self-deprecatingly. He still lifted his feet and walked along the aisle toward Mina's office. However, just as he walked through the first bend, a figure bumped into him. "Ah!" The young man's scream was accompanied by the muffled sound of an object falling to the ground. "Sorry, I was lost in my thoughts for a moment. Are you all right?" Although the man was old, his body was still strong. He only swayed slightly and stabilized his body. But the young man who had bumped into the ground in front of him shocked him. This is Zaft's military uniform? You are from Zaft?" The red military uniform, without a doubt, only Zaft's elites were qualified to wear it. Don't you use your eyes when you walk?" The young man shook his head and subconsciously scolded a few words. Suddenly, his eyes turned red. The white coat was dyed red with a large amount of blood. A man walked out from the depths of the aisle. Doctor, you're a doctor, right?" "A doctor? Doctor, come with me quickly. There's a pilot over there whose wound can't stop bleeding and has already shown symptoms of excessive blood loss. Come with me quickly." A black-haired young man wearing a red military uniform. A man wearing a blood-dyed shirt. Fate, at this moment, made a small joke. Chapter 832. Ray Minkai stood in the midst of the busy Naku. He looked around at the people who were focused on the work at hand and did not pay any attention to the large and small wounds on their bodies. At his feet, there was a bright red mark that had been wiped but was still eye-catching. Before Ray Minkai came to Naku, an unfortunate incident had happened here. A pilot who was lucky enough to be rescued by his comrades from the area full of beta wreckage suddenly suffered from an unknown hemorrhage when he was transferred out of the broken body and died on the spot. The pilots who thought they could save their comrades again watched a life that should not have been lost die in such a dramatic way in front of their eyes. It seems that I was overthinking. Mina's voice came from the right. What happened just now? I heard about it. Ray Minkai could guess what Mina was worried about. No matter how cruel and terrifying the enemy was, it could not compare to a comrade dying in such a helpless and dramatic way on the eve of rescue. This would be a serious blow to the pilots who had gritted their teeth and fought to the end. Yes, I walked around just now. Although everyone's morale is a little low, it can still ensure that the follow-up plan is carried out. Mina nodded, then raised her head and looked not far ahead. There, her beloved mech, Gold Heresy Mina, was parked. After quietly looking at her beloved mech for a moment, Mina moved her gaze and looked at an unusually quiet area on the left. There, Ray Minkai's mech, Lancelot, Sword of Kings, was parked. To be honest, when you appeared in front of me in this mech, do you know what my first reaction was? Ray Minkai shook his head, indicating that he did not know. Mina smiled softly. After the battle with Yakin Duwei, the pure white lion that crossed the starry sky destroyed the Genesis that was about to drag the earth into eternal damnation with a power that ordinary people could not understand. It also left behind a guide that indicated that the footsteps of mankind would never stop at the solar system. As she spoke, Mina's smile gradually became more mysterious. However, there is only one truth in the hearts of the survivors of the battle with Yakin Duwei, a legend that defended against the attack of the Genesis single-handedly. Mina shifted her gaze from Lancelot King's sword to Ray Minkai. And this legend is the knight who guards the princess, Ray Minkai, and the legendary mech he drives. The Freedom Gao de Ray Minkai was speechless. Although Mina's story made Ray Minkai feel a little lightheaded, after thinking about it carefully, he felt that this so-called legend was a little too exaggerated. A pure white lion that crossed the starry sky? What the hell was going on? That's not bad. I didn't expect the people of that world to have such foresight. In that instant, the image of a proud white cat appeared in Ray Minkai's mind. Needless to say, it was State Zero who became proud after hearing Mina's story. State Zero, don't you think that someone might be adding fuel to the fire behind the scenes? What do you mean? Minkai, are you saying that someone is using our performance in the battle with Yakin Duwei to stir up trouble? I have such a feeling. Ray Minkai was not sure, but he had a vague feeling in his heart. One must know that even in the original world, the chicken and wolf combination that ended the Genesis was far less exaggerated than Mina's description of Ray Minkai and State Zero's performance in the battle with Yakin Duwei. When Kira from the original world returned, the two parties involved in the battle would exclaim, "Gundam Freedom," in surprise, and then quickly take their lunches and leave the stage. On the other hand, based on Mina's description, Ray Minkai could speculate that if someone was adding fuel to the fire behind the scenes, constantly modifying Ray Minkai's performance in the battle with Yakin Duwei, making it into a legend, or even a myth, thinking deeper, Ray Minkai's brows were deeply furrowed. Creating a god? Seems like you've thought of that too. But from information I have so far, this is just an unconfirmed guess. Mina's words made Ray Minkai shake his head. No, since that's the case, there's no need to dwell on it. Now, we need to focus on the next path of the Pillar of Heaven. Yes, this is the last part of the journey. Do you regret it? If we persevere a little longer, reinforcements might have arrived. No, there's nothing to regret about this. Although the Pillar of Heaven is important, when we lose the people, no matter how important the Pillar of Heaven is, it's just a piece of scrap metal floating in space. Mina's gaze fell on a heretic that had undergone emergency repairs and was finally able to fight again. The people are the foundation of a country's foothold. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the weapon, no matter how indestructible the fortress, it's just a joke. For this reason, you didn't hesitate to use the Pillar of Heaven as a bargaining chip to open a path. Mina's plan was to use the Pillar of Heaven's huge mass and excellent defensive power to attract the enemy's attention as much as possible, thus creating an opportunity for Mina to evacuate the people in the Pillar of Heaven. Frankly speaking, this method wasn't a good one, especially before Ray Minkai led the rescue team to intervene. Even if they used the Pillar of Heaven to create an opportunity to evacuate, it would probably be difficult to succeed. There were simply too many betas. In addition, Mina, and even the Pillar of Heaven, lacked information about the beta. It was simply impossible to know where these terrifying enemies that seemed to be constantly surging in like monstrous waves came from, and how they could affect or even interrupt the beta's offensive. For everything, Mina could only rely on some of the data sent by the D space station before the loss of contact, and some of the images circulated from the Earth Alliance to speculate and formulate strategy. This is the only way. Night. Mina didn't regret her choice. Even after learning part of the truth about the beta from Ray Minkai, she had no intention of changing this method. At most, the goal of the Pillar of Heaven was changed from disturbing the enemy's line of sight, attracting the enemy's attention as much as possible, and covering the evacuation of the people to finding as much influence as possible and controlling the beta around the Pillar of Heaven. Then, with the Pillar of Heaven as a trump card, they would fight to the death. This isn't a good idea, but this is the most likely way to succeed at the moment. Knight, if the beta you described is true, then those disgusting monsters won't give us time to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Ray Minkai deeply agreed with Mina's words. What's more, the exploration drone cluster hovering in the universe around the Pillar of Heaven also happened to send back news. It was information about the second hive. Fine. I haven't sent out the gift I prepared for the beta yet. The intense treatment work finally came to an end. Whether it was those who died in the treatment or those who were reborn in the treatment, at this moment, they all became the last footprints of the Pillar of Heaven on its way to its final fate. Water washed the black-red blood stains off his hands, dyeing the entire water tray red. It also made real flying birds' already red pupils even redder and more ferocious. Thank you for your hard work, young man. The burly figure walked with slightly tired steps to real flying bird's side. The pair of hands that were also stained black and red with blood also turned on the tap like real flying bird, slowly and forcefully washing the bloodstains on his wrists. No, I'm just an assistant. There's nothing praiseworthy about it. Real flying bird shook her head. She did not take credit for the fact that she had been running all over the place to save as many lives as she could. Young man, your technique is very experienced. I can see that you have put in a lot of effort in battlefield first aid. Amidst the splashing sound of water, the steady but tired voice narrated the scene that the man had seen. That's just the result of practicing hard to be able to save my life as much as possible when I'm unfortunately injured on the battlefield. Real flying bird raised his hand to turn off the tap and raised his head slightly to look at himself in the mirror. Those ruby-like eyes were already at a loss. This was a scene that would only appear after experiencing life and death and witnessing life and death. You're tired. It's time to rest. Young man, a tall and sturdy figure appeared behind the real flying bird in the mirror. It was the man who was mistaken for a doctor by real flying bird and dragged along to treat the injured. Maybe, but now is not the time to rest. Real flying bird took a deep breath. Doctor, I'm very sorry for just now. I was anxious and did not ask clearly for the reason, so I dragged you over by force. The man waved his right hand, indicating that it was fine. No, that's what I should do. Even if you didn't say it, I would have run over myself. The man laughed self-deprecatingly. In the end, I, this seemingly useless old man, have some uses that could be used on the battlefield. Doctor, you. Real flying bird could not understand the man's self-deprecating words, but before he could ask, a figure interrupted his words. Before the figure that suddenly appeared could speak, he was warned by the man's gaze, scaring him so much that he immediately changed his words. Dr. Yura, Lord Mina has informed us. It's time. Mina. The man was stunned, and then his expression became abnormally heavy. I know. I'll be there soon. After a moment of silence, the man looked at real flying bird. Young man, thank you for coming here to support us, but please do your best to save your own life. His broad palm patted real flying bird's shoulder heavily. If we can meet again next time, then I hope that we can introduce ourselves and have a pleasant conversation. Chapter 833. The evacuation plan soon came to an end. Its speed allowed Ray Minkai to see Mina's control over the Pillar of Heaven. On the surface, the Pillar of Heaven belonged to OBS Orbital Space Station and was a key project connected to the orbital elevator under construction. But in fact, this man-made space engineering city of great significance, whether it was OB or on a global scale, had already become the subordinate of the Sahak family, led by Mina. Therefore, in the face of a crisis, Mina had the confidence to make a decision that represented the ultimate fate of the Pillar of Heaven. In the name of Ray Minkai, LDNOAH, activate. Ray Minkai, who boarded Lancelot's Sword of the King, awakened the sleeping LDNOAH. As soon as the screen lit up, a call from Mina followed. Mina, any changes in the battle plan? According to Mina's plan, Ray Minkai was to be the first echelon to attack, accompanied by the Pillar of Heaven's assault. No, the battle plan has not changed. The evacuation of the people has been completed. It's just that I want to confirm once again that the hive you mentioned really exists in the D36 area. The information is true and reliable. D36 area. This was an empty region located near the Pillar of Heaven's defense. The moment the Pillar of Heaven fell into this world, Mina had organized people to investigate the surrounding situation many times. Therefore, when this area, which was recorded as non-threatening in the inspection records, became the area where the hive that controlled the Beta army was located, Mina couldn't believe it. Mina, I know what you're thinking, but think about it. In the battle with Yakin Due, the state of the Genesis before it fired. At that time, we didn't know anything about its existence. Mina fell silent when she heard this. Naturally, she did not know that Lei Minkai had known about the existence of the Genesis long ago. However, before the Genesis had fired its cannons, it had relied on the Mirage system to hide its whereabouts. It had suddenly appeared in the midst of a fierce battle and destroyed more than half of the Earth's joint fleet in one fell swoop. Knight, you mean that the so-called hive will have a system and ability similar to the Mirage? I'm afraid that's the case. I understand. There were still 10 minutes left before the attack. When the time comes, I will attack together. It's my honor. The short exchange before the battle ended. Next, it was time for a bloody battle. However, under the protection of the celestial pillar that Mina had personally selected, the army was approaching Area D36. What should have been an empty area had become a playground for monsters. It was so huge that even the Pillar of Heaven's defense could not compare to it. There was also a dense swarm of ferocious monsters that swam around the outer wall of this huge fortress. They walked out of the caves on the left and right sides of the fortress, crossed a large distance on the outer wall, and then entered another cave. Looking at the horrifying scene that was constantly being captured and magnified by the electronic eyes, these capable subordinates that Mina regarded as her trusted subordinates all revealed a trace of shock and horror. It was the same for Mina. However, she wouldn't allow others, especially her subordinates, to see her being frightened by the terrifying fortress in Area D036. This is Hive, the night you mentioned. Yes, the hive used by the Cosmic Beta. In the distance, it was the engine fire released by the drone cluster that was released in advance for reconnaissance. Their mission was completed perfectly. However, now it was time for them to leave. Mina, the first wave of attack will be launched by us. Looking at the number of enemies on the screen in front of him, Ray Minkai knew that to complete this battle, he had to be the first to make the move. Ray, Jun, Luna Maria covered the fleet's assault. As the dark stream of light crashed down, the outline of Lancelot King's sword's body was directly swallowed by the darkness. When the outline of his body became clear again, it was the moment when the dimensional barrier was fully activated. Seeing this, as the leader of the trio, Ray naturally knew how to cooperate with Ray Minkai's attack. Jun, cover the fleet with me. Luna Maria, start the Freya launch program. Understood. Behind Lancelot King's sword, who was accelerating, two dazzling lights lit up. That was Pulsgauda and Zagu's Phantom, who were using artillery equipment as support. What a waste. These two boys. Ray Minkai shook his head slightly as he watched the scene of the beta that rushed out from behind Lancelot King's sword and tried to intercept Lancelot King's sword being blown up. As long as Lancelot King's sword's LDNOH reactor was strong enough, no matter how many betas had just reacted, they would only be the wreckage of Lancelot King's sword as he rushed toward the hive. This was not the case. Ray Minkai simply ignored the betas that were constantly accelerating, trying to block the impact of Lancelot King's sword with the highest speed and hard ram. That was because their obstruction was meaningless. Now, in addition to the fact that Lancelot King's sword did not have any gravitational force to attract objects, its existence was simply like a high-speed, moving small black hole. All the objects that came into contact with it were swallowed up, leaving only the broken bodies that had not come into contact with Lancelot King's sword. Straight up, the unstoppable linear acceleration trajectory tore apart the beta army that was crazily pouring out of the hive behemoth. At the same time, it firmly attracted the beta army and even the hive to Lancelot King's sword. That body is so strong. Who the hell is that person? The rear guard led by Mina was originally shocked by the size of the hive and the terrifying number of betas. They were almost scared out of their wits. However, after witnessing with their own eyes the figure of Lancelot King's sword, who did not put the terrifying number of beta troops in his eyes at all, charging forward on a rampage, exclamations had become the main melody between them. The same was true for Mina, who was the leader. Previously, when they met on the battlefield, Lancelot King's sword did not show the horror of the dimensional barrier. Instead, he relied on the powerful lethality of the Freya armor to open a path. This also inadvertently caused Mina to form a misunderstanding. Little did she know that the combination of Ray Minkai and Lancelot King's sword alone was enough to kill in and out of the beta army. Kai, be careful. That big guy might use a big move like last time. Just as Lancelot King's sword drove straight into the beta army with the help of the dimensional barrier and rushed towards the hive, the White Cat State Zero's reminder sounded in a timely manner. Yeah, I know. I'll leave the hive's movements to you. State Zero. Tisk, you really know how to order people around. After the White Cat State Zero clicked its tongue unhappily, it walked out of the shadows and obediently laid on the operation panel. It took over Lancelot King's sword's radar system through function fusion. Attention! A suspected high-energy reaction has been detected. I'm afraid that big guy has discovered the secret of this body. Unexpectedly, the moment the White Cat State Zero took over the radar system, it discovered the secret of the hive hidden behind the beta army. As expected, with the first surprise experience, no matter how stupid Ray Minkai was, he would know that he should be wary of the hive's terrifying move. After all, behind him was not the throne of command, but the pillar of heaven. Ray, it's time. Understood. In the blink of an eye, when the hive seemed to have shifted its attention to Lancelot King's sword, the opportunity that the trio brought by Ray had been waiting for had arrived. Luna Maria, fire. Ray, who had already locked onto all the universe-type betas with extremely high threats and large individuals, decisively gave the order. Yes, Freya armor, fire all bullets. Yes, that's right, all bullets. In one breath, all the Freya armor that had been brought over were fired and emptied, using the most lethal means to erase the beta strength as much as possible, providing an excellent opportunity for Mina and the others to launch a surprise attack. Nearly 100 rays of light suddenly rose into the sky, following the path left by Lancelot King's sword, and swarmed forward, heading straight for the large BTAs that had already been locked onto. At this moment, the stars were gathered. When hundreds of stars erupted almost at the same time, they displayed their most dazzling and brilliant brilliance in front of Mina and the others. Looking from afar, the hive's surroundings were filled with twinkling stars, and it was beautiful. However, behind this beautiful scene was the terrifying scene of the universe-type betas being devoured and annihilated. The path was opened. Pillar of Heaven. Activate the propulsion system at full power. Target. Hive. Under the brilliance of the Freya armor's explosion, Mina gave the order without hesitation. The final fate of the Pillar of Heaven was thus revealed. At the same time, Lancelot Kingsword, who had charged all the way, almost rushed to the front of the Hive's final line of defense. Here, universe-type betas that were up to 100 meters long, with a total of 18 to 20 large eyeballs lined up side by side in front of them, blocked the path of Lancelot Kingsword. Light-level beta in the form of a battleship? It had to be said that the sea of eyeballs in front of him that was constantly rotating and looked exceptionally terrifying was indeed very terrifying. If it weren't for the fact that Ray Minkai was already familiar with the aesthetics of the beta, he would probably have been scared into turning around and running away. Kai, they're here. Be careful. A dazzling light burst out from the densely packed battleship-shaped light-level beta, completely drowning Lancelot Kingsword. However, Lancelot Kingsword was unscathed. Ray Minkai's gaze moved down and looked at the index that represented the output of the reactor. No more, no less, it had only decreased by less than 5%. It seemed that as long as it wasn't the terrifying long-song cannon of Hive, it would be difficult for these battleship-shaped, light-level beta to break through the defense of Lancelot King's sword for a while. Then, Ray Minkai had the confidence to rush into Hive and cause trouble. Chapter 834. The vast space was a pitch-black void. It was the night that surrounded the blue planet. A retreating fleet composed of more than 10 spaceships was being escorted by the Recovery House and the Giant Serpent's Tail. They were retreating with their backs to Area D36 and towards the universe where the Throne of Domination was located. At the front of the retreating fleet, Uzmi stood at the porthole and stared at the universe behind the retreating fleet that was gradually moving away. He knew that every kilometer the retreating fleet moved away meant that the Pillar of Heaven was one step closer to its final fate. Sigh, it's the world of the young now. Don't you think so, Sir Uzmi? While Uzmi was deep in thought, a sigh came from beside him. It was the former patriarch of the Sahak family, Old Sahak. His face, which was far older than Uzmi, was filled with relief. Uzmi knew that after the night Mina killed Jaina, who was identified as the imprinted person, the former patriarch of the Sahak family decisively handed over the position of patriarch to Mina, while he himself secretly left Ob and came to the Pillar of Heaven, becoming an inconspicuous old man living on it. Uzmi was silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. He remembered that in the half-year, when the X-1 Rift crisis broke out, in the face of the defeat of the Earth Alliance and the terrifying crisis of the surface area being constantly devoured by the alien insect that Ray Minkai called Beta, his beloved daughter, Cuddly Yura Ashar, who had lost her protection and could only bitterly hold on, actually decided to eliminate the mastermind behind the disturbance in Ob overnight. Recalling the time when he learned the news and sat in his room for 3 days and 3 nights, Uzmi sighed deeply. Yes, it's the world of the young now. With a sigh, a dazzling light erupted from Area D36. The light seemed to be the sun, but it was not the sun. It was more like a pillar of light that drove away the darkness. It rose from Area D36, crossed a long distance, and swept across a distance of dozens of kilometers to the right of the retreating fleet. It's an attack. Uzmi and Old Sahak looked at each other. The latter, however, raised his hand and looked at the watch on his wrist. No, the battle is very smooth. There is no negative news from the front. Is that so? Amy nodded silently. Although the attack just now did not hit the retreating fleet, the power that could sweep through the void had already frightened the civilians of the retreating fleet. Old man, we'll be busy from now on. Amy shook her head slightly. Although we old fellows can't help much in battle, at least here, our names can still be of some use. You're right. Forget about my old bones. But Amy, you've already died for your country. Most of the people of the Pillar of Heaven still don't know of your existence. Compared to the current situation, this is just a small matter. Sammy stared at D36 for a long time. That was right. Compared to Ray Minkai and the others who were fighting the enemy in Area D36 and creating opportunities for the retreating fleet to retreat, this was just a small matter. Beep, 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 beep. The ear-piercing alarm slowly sounded, but the red light in front of him did not dissipate for a long time. On the bright monitor screen, there were the corpses of the alien insects that were burned by terrifying energy, rolling in flames and smoke. More than 10 seconds ago, a terrifying beam of light with a core diameter of at least hundreds of meters suddenly erupted from the depths of the Beta Army, sweeping away everything blocking the launch axis in one fell swoop with unstoppable power. At that moment, whether it was the Gravel, the MS, or even the Beta, they were all turned into ashes under this terrifying beam of light. What a terrifying attack! Mina swallowed her saliva subconsciously, and her eyes could not help but look at the small screen that displayed the list of communication connections. At the top of this list, the signal symbol representing Ray Minkai was still bright and clearly visible. Mina could not help but breathe a sigh of relief in her heart and immediately ordered the Pillar of Heaven to accelerate. All troops, cover the Pillar of Heaven with all your strength. Knight, you have successfully lured the enemy to use the long song cannon. Next, it's our mission. Yes, Master Mina. Yes, Master Mina. There were a total of 76 heretics following behind the Gold Heretic, and more than 1/5 of them had been lost compared to the hundreds that had just attacked. But the opportunity was already in front of them. Mina did not want to give up this great opportunity. Reza Barrel, lead your team and support us. Understood. Although they did not belong to the Pillar of Heaven, when the trio followed Ray Minkai here, Ray understood that when Ray Minkai personally drove the Lancelot King's sword into the depths of the enemy formation, the command of the trio would be handed over to Mina. Really, Luna Maria, land on the Pillar of Heaven and connect to the energy pipeline. Don't worry about the loss of the cannon barrel. Support the allies with all your strength. Yes, the attack of the Pillar of Heaven was most afraid of the beam attack that Ray Minkai had mentioned, which was comparable to the power of the long song cannon. Therefore, the purpose of Lancelot King's sword, in addition to disrupting the light-level Beta that posed a fatal threat to Mina, the trio, and the others, was to directly rush in front of the hive and lure it into using the terrifying attack that had previously caused the dimensional barrier to crash. In order to achieve this goal, under the control of Ray Minkai, Lancelot King's sword shuttled through the enemy formation like a swimming dragon. It could be said that he had used all his skills to provoke the hive that was like a titan compared to Lancelot King's sword again and again. Fortunately, due to the existence of the powerful system known as the dimensional screen, the warship-like classes that came from all directions were unable to obstruct the actions of Lancelot King's sword, no matter how hard they tried. In the battlefield where the laser beams crisscrossed, whenever Lancelot King's sword flew close to the outer wall of the hive, the surrounding battleship light-level Beta would immediately hesitate to attack. They did not dare to attack Lancelot King's sword at all, for fear that they would hit the hive if they were not careful. Oomph. Bugs are indeed bugs. Seeing this, the White Cat State Zero let out a burst of ridicule. Pay attention to the high-energy reaction of the hive. Ray Minkai did not care much about this. After all, this was one of the weaknesses of the Beta. However, compared to the battlefield on the ground, this weakness was infinitely magnified in this multidimensional space battlefield. Looking at the battleship light-level Beta that was forced to give up its attack but still pursued relentlessly, Ray Minkai slightly stepped on the pedal with his right foot. Lancelot King's sword suddenly dropped in height and crashed into the solid outer wall of the hive. It looked like it wanted to launch a divine attack on the hive, as if, before the outer wall of the hive, which was strong enough to withstand most medium and small caliber live ammunition, and even the main cannon fired by the main battleship of the Seed World, came into close contact with Lancelot King's sword, it was swallowed by the dimensional barrier that shrouded it. In just the blink of an eye, relying on its own ultra-high speed and dimensional barrier characteristics, Lancelot King's sword who did not make any offensive moves, had left a shocking scar on the outer wall of the hive. This scene seemed to have angered the battleship light-level beta that was chasing Lancelot King's sword. No, the answer was yes, because a different figure appeared behind the battleship light-level beta and pounced on Lancelot King's sword like lightning. They were his old friends, the Impact beta that launched an attack with a hard ram. In Raymond Kai's memory, the closest image to it was the assault beta that was active on the ground and gave the humans of the MUV world a nightmare. However, to Lei Mingkai, this was nothing more than a joke. The roar of a monster seemed to resound in the void, and his eyes were covered by that huge figure in the end. It was still the same. The figure of the Impact beta quickly swept past, but it had already split into two, entering the underworld with the anger of being unable to hurt Lancelot King's sword. Stop messing around. It's time to use your ultimate move. Beta. The rampaging Lancelot King's sword left shocking scars on the hive's body over and over again, causing the Impact-type beta to suffer heavy losses as it tried to intercept its movements. It's coming. Kai. Unknowingly, the beta that was closely following behind Lancelot King's sword had disappeared, leaving only Lancelot King's sword rampaging alone. Humph. Good timing. Ray Minkai snorted coldly. On the screen in front of him, there were already countless eyes that were open, constantly flipping, ferocious and terrifying big eyeballs. In the depths of these big eyeballs, a terrifying aura of destruction suddenly rose. It's coming. It was the attack that almost killed Ray Minkai on the battlefield. Compared to the previous time when he was caught off guard, this time, Ray Minkai deliberately did it. What's more, at such a close distance, it was difficult not to notice. As Ray Minkai stepped on the pedals alternately, Lancelot King's sword flipped over and suddenly accelerated towards the bottom of the hive. Boom! In the next second, the attack suddenly erupted. The light of destruction gradually faded, leaving behind the wreckage of the beta all over the D36 universe, as well as Lancelot King's sword hidden in the shadow of a battleship light-level beta. TSK. This thing really dared to make a move. Is this the suppression of a higher level on a lower level? The image of the White Cat State Zero looking around appeared in Ray Minkai's mind. This guy seemed to be frightened by the hive's ruthless behavior of including allies as part of the target of destruction. Didn't you see the same scene before? Why are you so surprised this time? It's a VIP seat this time. A VIP seat to watch these bugs kill each other up close. The White Cat State Zero waved its paw, and then a line appeared on the monitor screen. It was the fastest route to the interior of the hive through the wounds left by Lancelot King's sword's previous rampage. At the same time, with the efforts of Mina, the trio, and the others, the outline of the Pillar of Heaven gradually became clearer. Chapter 835. Hideous and terrifying silhouettes swayed in the dark passage. The dense silhouettes that could make people with trypophobia faint on the spot poured out from the depths of the passage, quickly and frantically rushing along the passage to the outside world, rushing towards the huge wound torn by Lancelot King's sword. There seems to be the existence of air. In the deeper shadows, a pair of electronic eyes that had restrained most of the light was silently watching the group of betas waving their tentacles and sharp claws as they passed by not far ahead. It was also because of the movement caused by this group of betas that the White Cat Zero caught a trace of strangeness. A trace of strangeness that should not exist in space. A stream of light flashed in the White Cat Zero's eyes, and a faint rustling sound was captured and sounded in the cockpit. This is not surprising. After all, this thing is still a kilometer-level behemoth, no matter what. It's not surprising that there is air in it. Ray Minkai did not care. The deeper he went into the hive, the more abnormal the surrounding air pressure became. Keep going. We have to hurry. From the information obtained on the communication channel, the Pillar of Heaven's defense would soon enter the hive's defense area. Ray Minkai had to hurry and drive Lancelot King's sword into the deepest part of the hive to fight face-to-face with the thousands of brain-level commanders. He had to attract the attention of the brain level as much as possible to prevent it from discovering the pillar of heaven's defense's intention. Behind the group of betas whizzing past, the silhouette of Lancelot King's sword walked out of the shadows. After the pure white steel giant sized up the movements on both sides of the passage, it took off again and went straight to the deepest part of the hive. Of course, no matter how careful Ray Minkai and the White Cat Zero were, this was always the enemy's territory. Lancelot King's sword accelerated all the way to the deepest part of the brain level, but it still encountered an obstacle. The betas with huge pincers, scorpion-like bodies, and tails that were supposed to be full of poison were blocked in front of it. Looking around, there were at least 3 digits of monsters surging in the shadows. Interceptor level? Hee. That's all. If Ray Minkai was piloting a battle mech, he would probably turn around and leave immediately. A single digit or even a small number of interceptors was not scary in front of a skilled tactical pilot. However, the number of interceptors in front of him was no less than 3 digits. It was enough to bury any tactical pilot here in an instant. But now, the body that Ray Minkai was piloting was the Lancelot King sword that had its dimensional barrier activated. This trifling number of interceptors wasn't worth mentioning at all. Lancelot King's sword did not retreat. Instead, he charged straight into the interceptor level at an even faster speed. Pooh, pooh. In an instant, there were sounds that sounded like tearing, but were not tearing. In an instant, the interceptor-level corpses that had lost a part of their bodies fell to the ground. Only after Lancelot's King's sword had broken through this group of interceptor-level interceptors did the smooth and tender red surface spurt out a large amount of captivating red. The red quickly converged into numerous captivating red puddles on the bumpy passageway. Roar! Lancelot King's sword, who had easily broken through the interceptor level's interception and rushed deeper in, suddenly heard a shrill roar. Over there. In the next second, a prompt popped up on the monitor screen that the White Cat State Zero had locked on to the source of the sound. On the next level, Ray Minkai frowned slightly. Although the surrounding air pressure became more normal as Lancelot King's sword went deeper, the 2 levels separated by the thick stone wall could still hear such a clear roar. It's luring the enemy. I think so too. White Cat State Zero nodded slightly. Immediately after, 2 streams of light arrived first. They swept past Lancelot King's sword from behind and rushed into the dark passage first. It was the armed compound flying wing. As the passage gradually became narrower, there was not much need for the armed compound flying wing to monitor the surroundings. Therefore, White Cat State Zero did not hesitate to let the extra armed compound flying wing go ahead first to investigate the situation. As expected, as the armed compound flying wing rushed forward, a huge door appeared on the monitor screen. Behind the wide open door was the source of the mournful howls. However, it was also because of the appearance of this huge door that Ray Minkai's guess was confirmed. This was undoubtedly a trick to lure the enemy in. If Ray Minkai did not have a certain understanding of the inside of Hive, he might have encountered the tragic scene that the Silver Squad suffered at that time. Gate level? It's beta. Under the huge, circular hole, there was a long conduit that was wriggling slowly. It was the size of a war machine. Although this conduit looked strange and terrifying, it was a large conduit used when the gate-level beta was replenishing. Rush over? White Cat State Zero was eager to try. Obviously, this guy also knew some information about the gate-level beta. Even if the ultra-high voltage electric current attack described in the data is real, I'm afraid it can't break through the dimensional barrier, right? No, it's a matter of probability. The dimensional barrier is not an all-around defense. Ray Minkai shook his head. Although Ray Minkai had been driving Lancelot King's sword since the beginning of the battle, he was insufferably arrogant. In fact, Ray Minkai paid close attention to the direction of Lancelot King's sword. He carefully avoided the gap that was deliberately left open to communicate with the armed compound flying wing. This was the weakness of the seemingly invincible dimensional barrier. In other words, as the saying goes, the golden bells cover door. Turn around and go back. White Cat State Zero turned around and looked at Ray Minkai. There seemed to be a trace of mockery in its eyes. Facing this trace of mockery, Ray Minkai smiled. No, just rush up. Regardless of how the gate level's ultra-high voltage electric current attack might cause the dimensional barrier system of Lancelot King's sword to fail, Ray Minkai was still confident that he could kill this gate level beta. The white flash flashed and disappeared. The moment it passed through the gate level beta from bottom to top, it had already disappeared into the darkness behind the door. Only the 20-meter deep scar that was slowly filled with terrible crimson was left behind, and a huge monster's corpse that had lost all vitality. In the darkness, the propelling flames of the armed compound flying wing wandered in this space like fluorescent light. Judging from their trajectory, the location where Lancelot King's sword arrived at was in a room with a huge space. Roar! All of a sudden, a thunderous roar rang out, but it attracted the attention of the armed compound wings that were wandering around, and they scattered beams of light. The moment the beams of light passed by, the true appearance of the behind-the-scenes black beast that was hidden in the darkness, roaring and attracting Lancelot King's sword, was completely exposed to the electronic eyes of Lancelot King's sword. At the end of the thick and powerful limbs with exposed muscles, there was a hard, square-shaped object about 4 meters in size that was firmly grasped. As the beams of light flashed, Ray Minkai had already seen the number of strange, square-shaped hard objects clearly. 6 pieces. There were a total of 6 square-shaped objects that were about 4 meters in size. They were all firmly controlled by the thick and powerful limbs with exposed muscles. And under this slowly waving hard, almost hammer-like object, there was a metal jointed body that was similar to the interceptor level, but not quite the same. And this jointed body, with flashing metal limbs, was the key to resisting the first wave of light beam attack of the armed compound flying wing. Strike level or hammerhead level? At first glance, Ray Minkai's mind flashed with a setting map of a rare body. The appearance recorded on the map seemed to be very similar to the beta in front of him. But other than that, Ray Minkai only remembered the name that he almost couldn't remember. The whistling sound of the wind rushed over, interrupting Ray Minkai's thoughts, but couldn't hit Lancelot King's sword, who was always protected by the dimensional barrier. A familiar scene appeared once again. The moment the hammer, which seemed to be able to smash the battle tactic machine into smithereens, was about to touch Lancelot King's sword's body, it flashed and disappeared without a trace. Then, without waiting for the strike level in front of him to recover, Lancelot King's sword raised his hand and punched the head of the strike level. The moment the fist wind fell, a smooth and neat cut appeared on the body of the strike level. The battle was over? No, it was far from over. The strike level fell. A fluorescent light that looked like blue and green suddenly lit up, illuminating the huge space shrouded in darkness. It also revealed the alien hidden in the depths of this huge space, the leader of the beta that controlled thousands of people, in front of Ray Minkai. At the same time, with the appearance of this leader behind Lancelot King's sword, a rustling sound came from the depths of the dark tunnel. Lancelot King's sword was surrounded. As expected, it was an ambush. Among the beta that swarmed over and rushed out of the dark tunnel, a large group of light level quietly appeared among them, staring at the position of Lancelot King's sword. Swish! There were no words. There was no communication. The moment the huge and terrifying eyeball reflected the outline of Lancelot King's sword, it was already the moment when the deadly light pierced through the darkness. An ear-piercing alarm sounded, and the screen in front of him quickly turned red. Lancelot King's sword was in imminent danger. In the blink of an eye, the figure of Lancelot King's sword shattered like the reflection of the moon. There was no sign of him being hit or exploding. Even the dimensional barrier that swallowed all the attacks before, leaving only ripples, did not exist. Seeing this, the body of the brain level, who was commanding the beta under his command to ambush Lancelot King's sword, shook and suddenly turned to the other side of the hall. There, a terrifying radiance suddenly rose up. The white steel giant raised its right hand, and four-armed compound wings were attached to both sides of its wrist. When the blazing energy spewed out from the spout of the armed compound wings, a huge lightsaber was formed. Draw the sword. As Rei Minkai's voice fell, a torrent of energy with a terrifying high temperature swept through the many beta that were mixed with the light level. Then, slowly pointing the lightsaber at the brain level, Lancelot Kingsword was surrounded by pitch-black wreckage that had been scorched by the high temperature. Chapter 836. The stars in the sky were dazzling. Under the stars was the throne shrouded in starlight. And on the throne was the mysterious girl who was regarded as a god by the entire Parliament of Destiny. From the day this mysterious girl, who was regarded as a god, ascended the throne surrounded by starlight, she had never left, nor did she respond to anyone below the throne. There is only the figure of the Speaker of Destiny who stood under the throne, silently waiting for the revelation. Tap! At this moment, when everything was shrouded in starlight and silent, an untimely sound of footsteps suddenly sounded. The Speaker of Destiny, who was standing under the throne, turned his gaze slightly and saw a face. It was a face with heavy makeup, with a crying face on the left and a smiling face on the right. Mr. J. There is only one person in the Destiny Council who could have such an extraordinary appearance and image. That was Mr. J, who was known to appear and disappear mysteriously, and was also privately called the Clown by some members of the Parliament of Destiny. Oh, Mr. Speaker, I didn't expect that when I went out on business, you would welcome our God back. The exaggerated cry broke the silence, but it did not alarm the mysterious girl on the throne. Silence. The Speaker of Destiny looked at Mr. J's exaggerated performance and coldly scolded him. Mr. Speaker, you're wrong. Why didn't you inform me to come back for such an important matter as welcoming the return of our God? After a few strange cries, Mr. J no longer paid attention to the Speaker of Destiny, whose face gradually turned cold and turned to look at the throne on the high platform. Mr. J, who was dressed flamboyantly, bowed slightly and solemnly saluted the throne on the high platform. Due to delays, I was unable to participate in the welcome of Her Majesty's return. Please forgive me. The clown bowed deeply until the shadow covered the crying face on one side and the smiling face on the other. But this still did not attract the attention of the girl on the throne. Perhaps, from the beginning, the girl did not notice the commotion that Mr. J made at all. The starlight still scattered from above, and silence still came from all directions. No matter how good Mr. J's etiquette was, he did not receive a compliment or a response. Mr. J, enough. The head of the House of Destiny opened his mouth again and reprimanded the clown. The reprimand made Mr. J tremble. In the next moment, his body trembled violently, as if he was enduring something. However, this patience did not last long before it was broken by something hidden in Embark's body. No, how can this be? No. The exaggerated cry was incomparably sharp. It was like a small knife piercing through the air. It broke through the silence enveloped by starlight and pierced straight towards a throne that did not give any response. However, before Mr. J could explode further, a voice came from the throne. The stars have gone out. The simple and calm words immediately interrupted Mr. J's outburst, and also caused the Speaker of the Destiny's gaze to change as he abruptly looked up at the bright starry sky. That was right. In the depths of the resplendent starry sky, a star was extinguishing. Moreover, not long ago, the star that was about to die was next to the star that had been dead for a long time. Seeing this, the head of the Destiny's throat moved, but no words came out. In the end, the man standing under the throne bowed deeply. After bowing to the girl that he regarded as a god, he turned around and left without hesitation. It was not until his figure disappeared behind the starlight that a gaze fell from the throne. Clown, give me a performance. The words that were supposed to be cold and unapproachable were actually sweet to the crazed clown. Yes, Your Majesty. Therefore, under the starlight, Mr. J, the Senator of Destiny, who was dressed exaggeratedly and had a strange face, waved his hands and threw out small balls, daggers, and other objects. Like an acrobatic clown on the street, he presented the most complacent performance for the god on the high platform. As for whether the gaze that was looking down from the throne had noticed his performance or not, Yi Fuqian did not know. Mr. J did not care at all. Perhaps what he cared about was that she needed him to perform at this critical moment. At this moment, in the depths of the resplendent stars, in a hive of strange insects that was regarded as a natural enemy by humans, a terrifying blade that spewed out a surging stream of blazing particles swept away all the large and small betas that were trying to block Lancelot's sword of the king's movement space. The terrifying high temperature not only killed the ferocious and terrifying betas, but it also caused the space that was used to reside in to be completely immersed in the impact of the high temperature. One wave, another wave, did not fall, continued to push the temperature of this space higher and higher, to an even hotter peak. The terrifying temperature distorted the air, causing it to show a distortion phenomenon that could be clearly seen with the naked eye. Sizzle. No matter how ferocious and terrifying the betas were, their bodies were still made of flesh and blood. Under this increasingly scorching high temperature, they could only be quickly roasted and eventually carbonized. Roar. Looking at the scene of Lancelot, Sword of the King, easily waving the particle beam blade in his hand and wiping out the soldiers under his command, the Brainiac could not sit still. Originally, this Brainiac wanted to rely on the uniqueness, strangeness, and many backup plans of the Gatekeeper Beta to completely kill Lancelot, Sword of the King's body that had recklessly rushed into the hive. However, when it came down to it, it realized that even if it had many tricks up its sleeves, it would not be able to hurt this audacious human mech that was charging in front of it like a gallop. At this moment, the Brainiac was scared. The Brainiac, who only knew how to complete the task given to them by their creator, had a rare trace of fear. However, it was unable to react to this, because it did not have any ability to move in the first place. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound of particles rushing echoed in this space, accompanied by waves of blazing high temperature that constantly attacked the Brainiac. Roar! The order to summon all the betas inside the hive to come to the rescue had already been issued, but the terrifying light blade in front of it would not stop because of this. Pa, pa, pa. Suddenly, afterimages rushed out from behind the Brainiac, and with bursts of wind-breaking sounds, they whipped towards Lancelot, Sword of the King. This was not a fatal blow, nor was it an attack that would perish together. It was just a helpless action taken by the Brainiac to stall for time. The Brainiac, which did not have any ability to move, could only take such an inefficient approach. That's right, it was inefficient. When faced with Lancelot King's sword that was protected by the dimensional barrier from beginning to end, all of the attacks and strategies of the Brainiac were rendered useless. In the end, the Brainiac could only nurse a grievance within the ordinary ripples of the dimensional barrier. Is this the end? Lancelot, Sword of the King, sometimes waved the beam blade in his hand to cut off the afterimages in the air, and sometimes his hands hung down, allowing the Brainiac's attacks to fall, and finally disappeared in the ripples of the dimensional barrier's colorful light. In front of him, the Brainiac's doomed ferocity was so powerless and ridiculous. For a moment, it gave Ray Minkai the illusion that he was tired of it. In the original world, when facing the humans who gathered all their forces and launched the Sakura War, did you also have this illusion? Thinking of this, Ray Minkai smiled coldly. With a move of his hands, Lancelot, Sword of the King put away his blade and suddenly turned around to leave the Brainiac's attack range. This sudden retreat stunned the Brainiac for a moment, and it seemed that it could not react. Let's stop here. Under the control of the system's command, the armed composite wings that were flying around Lancelot, Sword of the King quickly returned to the back of Lancelot, Sword of the King, and a pair of gorgeous and deadly steel wings unfolded. Seeing this, the the Brainiac was afraid that Lancelot, Sword of the King, would have some new tricks. When it quickly put on a defensive posture, it did not expect Lancelot, Sword of the King, to suddenly rise from the ground, and with lightning speed, it turned into a stream of light and rushed to the dome above. This scene completely stunned the Brainiac. Lancelot, Sword of the King, who had been fighting to the death and almost killed him a second ago, actually took the initiative to retreat in the next second. This made the Brainiac unable to react at all. Little did they know that behind Lancelot, Sword of the King's sudden retreat, it was outside the hive. The moment the huge figure broke through the blockade of the outer beta troops and forcefully crashed into the hive. Boom! The terrifying impact brought by the terrifying mass instantly tore apart the outer wall of the hive, smashing through the large and small passageways all over the beta. It also followed the arrangements left behind by Lancelot, Sword of the King's previous assault, and charged towards the huge room where the Brainiac was. Boom! The inner wall shattered. Smoke and dust billowed. The beta, whose bodies were torn apart by the violent shock waves caused by the impact, rolled out of the smoke and dust and landed in front of the Brainiac. The spreading bright red deeply stimulated the Brainiac. However, the Brainiac did not seem to have emotional nerves that humans understood. The so-called stimulation was probably just the truth of why Lancelot, Sword of the King, suddenly retreated. Under this stimulation, the Brainiac waved the dancing afterimages and aimed at the top of its head and shot wildly. That's right. Rays of light burst out from the end of the afterimages, blocking the space above the Brainiac's head and also the path of Lancelot, Sword of the King's retreat. Boom! Unfortunately, after the first round of these beams of light was launched, they were unable to touch Lancelot, Sword of the King's body. An even more terrifying collapse separated the space between the Brainiac and Lancelot, Sword of the King. What's more, the gravel that rolled down from the collapse that exploded into billowing smoke and dust became the talisman that sent the Brainiac to the Yellow Springs. Rumble, the moment the large and small gravel wantonly enveloped the Brainiac with its own shadow, it had already been completely crushed into a meat patty. Chapter 837. As the beams of light crisscrossed, they tore apart the monsters named Beta. This was already the first hour after the battle began. At the same time, it was also the moment when the battle was about to end. When Rei Minkai's Lancelot, Sword of the King, broke into the interior of Hive, Mina did not hesitate to lead everyone to cover the assault of the Pillar of Heaven while the Beta's defensive forces were restrained. Of course, compared to the small MS, the presence of the Pillar of Heaven was much stronger. Even the Beta, who had been restrained by Lancelot, Sword of the King's assault, had once again scattered their forces at this moment, trying to intercept the assault of the Pillar of Heaven. Don't be afraid. We are already standing at the door of victory. While Mina's kindred sky, Mina waved the Tachi of Calamity in its hand to cut the pale monsters that rushed in front of it into pieces. It also sent orders for Mina to all its allies. Yes, Mina-sama, for the Sahak family, for the Pillar of Heaven. The subordinates, led by Mina, naturally did not need to be told much. What Mina really needed to pay attention to was the three-man team that stayed on the Pillar of Heaven from beginning to end, using the surging energy provided by the energy pipeline to provide strong and powerful firepower support for the cover troops led by Mina. It was not that Mina did not want his subordinates to take on this role. It was that under this continuous battle, the heavy firepower equipment on the Pillar of Heaven was almost exhausted, and the remaining ammunition reserves, except for the necessary consumption for cover operations, were all gathered by Mina for his use. Therefore, the three-man team that followed Rei Minkai and happened to carry heavy firepower equipment, and at the same time, the energy weapons and equipment that the Pillar of Heaven urgently lacked were naturally arranged by Mina to be in the position of firepower support. Listening to the slogan of the Pillar of Heaven on the communication channel, Real Flying Bird could not help but grit his teeth. Was the situation of the battle clear? Real Flying Bird was not too sure. All he knew was that the surrounding attacks did not fall too much. but instead became more and more violent as the pillar of heaven advanced. But Real Flying Bird lowered his gaze and glanced at the planned schedule at the bottom right of the screen. Currently, there were only 3 minutes left before the pillar of heaven's defense hit the hive. In front of him, the enemy's attacks were getting fiercer and fiercer, but they lacked the madness of facing death. Did the night really attract the attention of bugs? Real Flying Bird thought about it, but did not continue to investigate. This was because the countdown had reached its final minute. Hive was right in front of their eyes. It was time to retreat. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst the explosion of the self-destructing bolts, Cannon Pulse Gouda, Zagu's Warrior, and Zagu's Phantom all disconnected the energy pipes connected to the energy hub of the Pillar of Heaven's defense. They all jumped up and started pushing their backpacks with all their might, leaving the Pillar of Heaven's defense at their fastest speed and flying towards Mina and the others. As for the latter, they even sent half of their forces to support the three of them. Quick, retreat. Looking at the trio who had successfully regrouped with her subordinates, Mina placed herself and her landline, Gold Outlier Sky Mina, in the rear. This was her responsibility. At the same time, it was also her obligation. The purpose of the Pillar of Heaven's defense was to allow Aubrey to obtain better development channels and better resources in the great development era of the universe. But now, Mina had personally turned such an important existence into a bomb and sent it in front of Beta to perish together with it. This was not the ending that the Pillar of Heaven's defense should have, but it was the most suitable ending for the Pillar of Heaven's defense at the moment. Patriarch Sahak will cover the rear. Seeing Gold Outlier Sky Mina covering the rear, the Commule immediately guessed Mina's intentions. No, Rezabarrel, your help is enough for the Pillar of Heaven's defense. We'll take care of the rest ourselves. But Mina would not give Ulay and the others a chance to cover the rear. Therefore, under the protection of many M1 heretics, the trio could only silently retreat while watching Gold Outlier Sky Mina, who was waving the blade in her hand and beheading the Beta who was trying to chase after them, as well as the battleship Ray-level Beta, who seemed to be moving slowly but was actually crashing into the Pillar of Heaven in an unstoppable manner. It finally reacted and wanted to intercept the Pillar of Heaven's defense, but it was already too late. The huge eyeball, which could instantly launch a laser that could penetrate the MS armor, had not yet rotated to the best angle of attack when it was smashed into pieces by the massive Pillar of Heaven's defense, along with the ugly body of the battleship Ray-level Beta. Perhaps, in a vacuum, the death wails of these ugly and terrifying monsters could not be heard. But the moment the Pillar of Heaven was about to collide with the hive, the blood mist that filled the space between the two was the symbol of the end of these ugly monsters. In the silent space, after the huge man-made orbital space station passed through the layers of interception, it finally collided with the behemoth created by the otherworldly monsters that had crossed time and space to come to this world, the hive. In an instant, billowing smoke and dust exploded between the two behemoths. In the violent collision. In the billowing smoke and dust, a signal was sent out from Gold Outlier Sky Mina, crossing the void and instantly activating the device buried inside the Pillar of Heaven's defense. Beep, beep, beep. There was no countdown. There were no accidents either. What happened was that at the moment the signal activated the device, all the ammunition that Mina had collected in advance and installed in the Pillar of Heaven's defense by some kind of remote-controlled explosion had brazenly exploded all the terrifying energy contained within it. At this moment, the blazing energy that could burn everything rushed along the collision crack between the Pillar of Heaven's defense and the hive, swallowing all the Beta blocking in front of it. It went straight to the core of the hive, the center where the brain level was located, passing by Lancelot King's sword who had rushed up to the dome. At the same time, it also gave the brain level a ticket to the underworld. Boom! Rumble! The collision between the behemoths instantly destroyed the structure of the hive, and also caused cracks to appear on the dome above Lancelot King's sword. Draw your sword. In the blink of an eye, The moment the four-armed composite flying wings flew out from the end of the steel wings and converged on Lancelot King's sword's right hand was the moment the particle beam sword that had wiped out many large and small beta appeared again. One hit. Just one hit. The moment the explosion below was about to roll up to the dome, Lancelot King's sword waved the particle beam sword in his hand, broke through the dome in one fell swoop, and rushed out into space. TSK, TSK, TSK. What a huge commotion. White Cat State Zero glanced at the explosion that swallowed everything below the steel wings, and then looked at the place where the Pillar of Heaven's defense collided with the hive, and could not help but let out a sound of amazement. All of a sudden, a violent shock wave surged forward. Fortunately, Ray Minkai reacted quickly and stabilized Lancelot King's sword's flying posture, and was not blown away by the sudden shock wave. However, along with the shock wave came the remains of the beta that had lost their vitality. Their bodies were scarred from the impact of the collision and explosion between the behemoths. The intensity almost caused the colorful ripples on Lancelot King's sword's body to flicker again and again, and there was almost no chance for them to stop. This was just the appetizer. Even though the collision between the behemoths had already buried the brain level, it did not mean that this collision had reached the end. The shockwave that sent countless beta remains flying had not yet stopped, and the next wave of stronger and more violent explosions had already occurred. The steel wreckage that was torn from the Pillar of Heaven's defense. What peeled off from the hive seemed to be rocks, but also seemed to be fragments of biological tissue. Sometimes they entangled each other. Sometimes they rolled and flew into deep space. The only thing in common was that they all rode the shock wave generated by the explosion of the destructive behemoths to fly into deep space. Mina frowned, but she could hear the sound of Jean Yaduanshin Mina struggling to hold on under the shock wave. If it was just dealing with the shock wave and keeping Jean Yaduanshin Mina from being blown away, Mina was confident that she could do it. However, the beta remains that had been torn apart by the collision between the Pillar of Heaven's defense and the hive had become a crisis that Jean Yaduanshin Mina had to face. One had to know that Jean Yaduanshin Mina did not have Lancelot King's sword's dimensional barrier, which could be called a bug, and the ability to ignore the impact of the beta remains that had been blown away by the shockwave. In order to avoid being knocked away by the wreckage, Jean Yaduanshin Mina finally hid behind a wreckage with a relatively intact ram under Mina's control, waiting for the end of the collision. After an unknown amount of time, when the retreating M1 heretics once again gathered towards Jean Yaduanshin Mina's position, the violent collision that occurred in the silent vacuum finally came to an end. Lord Mina, it's over. Lord Mina, we won. The joy of her subordinates' victory and the joy of survival came through the communication. This made Mina breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone, thank you very much for your efforts. Mina paused, raised her gaze, and looked at the huge wreckage that could no longer be distinguished between the Pillar of Heaven's defense and the hive. Lund Mina Sahak, are you going to apologize for burying the Pillar of Heaven's defense with your own hands? The fluorescence of the armed composite wings flashed through the void, and the figure of Lancelot King's sword landed in front of Jean Yaduanshin Mina. Looking at Lancelot King's sword, who was unscathed and did not look like he had completed a difficult mission to penetrate deep into the enemy's rear, Mina raised the corners of her mouth slightly and smiled calmly. No, I won't apologize. It's true that the Pillar of Heaven is our home, but there's nothing wrong with the decision I made. In the face of a powerful enemy, we can temporarily lose our home, but we can't lose our people. Only by letting the people survive under the threat of a crisis can we rebuild our home again. After a pause, Mina looked firmly at Lancelot King's sword. Knight, without the people, even if we risk everyone's lives to preserve the Pillar of Heaven's defense, it's just an empty shell. Chapter 838. The sun was setting in the west, and the glow of time was blood red. It dyed the land that was full of devastation and corpses with a layer of dazzling blood-red gauze. Especially The original appearance of this land full of corpses was an endless, beautiful blue sea. This layer of blood-red land full of corpses was so dazzling. The human faces that died with their eyes open, the remains of ferocious and terrifying monsters, the steel giants that were more than half dyed red with blood, and the figure standing on the reef that was originally a protruding piece of the sea, but was now regarded as the highest point of the battlefield by humans. Prime Minister, the battle is over. A tall and sturdy figure walked up the reef from below with a hint of fatigue. He stood behind the figure and said softly. The wind blew at this moment, carrying the smoke of gunpowder from the battlefield. Along with it, the nauseating smell of blood that permeated the battlefield engulfed everything. In this gentle breeze, amidst the nauseating smell of blood, the figure standing on the top of the reef slowly turned around. A pair of slightly tired but incomparably determined eyes looked at the burly man through the fluttering golden hair. Chisaka, how are our losses? 30% of the armored forces tanks were damaged. Most of the rest of the tanks can be used again after emergency repairs. Air power. When the burly man called Chisaka mentioned air power, he couldn't help but pause. At this point, the blonde woman who had the title of Prime Minister also understood what he meant. In the next battle, I'm afraid we can no longer rely on the power of the Air Force. Prime Minister. In fact, the remaining types of fighters can still be used in actual combat after emergency repairs. Chisaka opened his mouth and finally said this conclusion that even he himself wasn't very sure. Emergency repairs? No, Chisaka. There's no need for that. The blonde woman shook her head slightly and seemed to sigh. Then, she turned her back to Chisaka and looked at the land dyed red in front of her again. We know the strength of those monsters very well. We can hold on until now because we can make the decision to join the Fate Alliance in the first place. Otherwise, with our air power and even the various fire support forces in the rear restrained by those disgusting big eyeballs, Aubrey would have been destroyed by the monsters long ago. Prime Minister, no. The blonde woman waved her hand and tried to show a smile. Chisaka, now we've won. This is enough. Chisaka was stunned for a moment, but he still nodded slightly. Yes, we've won this battle. This was the 10th day of Aubrey's invasion a year after the outbreak of the X-1 Rift crisis. Whether it was through official or private intelligence channels, Prime Minister Aubrey, who had some understanding of the crisis that erupted from the mysterious space rift in the universe, the young Kari Yura Ashar, after receiving the news that the Earth Alliance had been defeated, that they had lost a large part of their territory in a short time, and that they were even forced to retreat to the core civilization circle by the sudden appearance of alien insects, she immediately sent a signal to the international community that she hoped to join forces to fight against the unknown enemy. Of Aubrey, of Aubrey, of Aubrey, of Aubrey of Aun, and moreover, with the vast Pacific Ocean as a barrier, Aubrey, located in the South Pacific Ocean, would not be attacked by the alien insects in a short period of time. Based on this situation, the many forces represented by the Earth United would not pay attention to Aubrey and the young Prime Minister. In their eyes, this was just a little girl's laughable appearance of being frightened by the alien insects. Even if they themselves were badly battered by the strange insects that descended from the sky. After running around and calling for cooperation to slay the alien insect crisis, Aubrey, who was ignored and even ridiculed, finally found an ally who responded to her call. Yes, while the countries on Earth were troubled by the alien insects, in the universe, Plant, which had been suppressed by the Earth United in various ways, won the first victory against the alien insect invasion under the leadership of a new speaker, Gilbert Dylandel. Moreover, it was an extremely beautiful first victory. Borrowing the prestige of this great victory, Plant's speaker, Dylandel, decisively launched his long-hidden plan. Destiny Plan, an advanced plan that divided the social functions according to the talent of human genes. In the original history, this sly old speaker went through a series of operations to obtain a great amount of public opinion, strength, and international support before he threw out this plan. However, Now that humans were facing the crisis of the alien insect invasion, this plan would probably be seen as a laughable plan by some people in the Earth Alliance as a last-minute effort. But it was this plan that gave the young Prime Minister a glimmer of hope. The alien insect invasion did not harm Aubrey for the time being, but who could guarantee that the vast Pacific Ocean could protect Aubrey from the alien insect invasion for a long time? Due to this concern, Aubrey, who was a traditional friendly country with Plant, sent out a communication request to Plant in an attempt to understand the entirety of Destiny Plan. In the end, both sides hit it off. Zaft, who had obtained an advantage over the alien insects on the space battlefield, immediately responded to the request of the Plant Parliament and provided 3 rounds of technical assistance to help Aubrey in the initial stages of Destiny Plan. In fact, Aubrey's concern was correct. Destiny Plan had just been launched, and the first stage of screening had not been completed. Then, a change occurred. A disaster swept across the world. The Pacific Ocean, which was regarded as Aubrey's patron saint, faced a great crisis of rapidly falling water levels. With the constantly receding water levels and the appearance of marine life that died from exposure to the scorching sun, the alien insect army that brought death and terror to the Eurasian continent finally launched an attack on Aubrey. In the face of this crisis, Aubrey led the Aubrey Defense Force to the front line without hesitation to resist the invasion of the alien insect army. At the same time, she sent a request to Plant to assist the citizens of Aubrey to seek refuge. At the same time, she also requested to complete the first stage of Destiny Plan among the refugees. Because of this decision, batch after batch of potential soldiers who had been selected by Project Fate joined the battle against the invasion of the alien insects. However, most of these recruits who had the potential to be warriors were killed within 5 minutes of the start of the battle. Aubrey looked at the blood-red land in front of her. Aubrey looked at the human corpses mixed in with the wreckage of the monsters. Aubrey looked at the cockpit that was destroyed by the alien insect monsters and stained red with blood. Aubrey silently bowed to them. However, before Aubrey could move, Chisaka pulled her to the ground. "Prime Minister, be careful!" Chisaka screamed in horror. An ear-piercing rumble tore through the sky and descended from the sky. At the same time, along with the arrival of this rumbling sound, a blazing heat followed closely. Is it a warship? No, it's a meteorite. Under Chisaka's protection, Aubrey, who regained her senses, looked up slightly and saw the sunset sky being torn apart by a series of fireballs. As soon as these fireballs appeared without warning, they brought with them a deafening rumble and a high temperature that could burn everything. The billowing smoke covered the inside of the fireballs, making it impossible to figure out what was hidden in the fireballs that tore through the sky. The only thing they knew was that these fireballs that appeared out of nowhere seemed to be heading straight for them. Seek refuge? It was too late. Such a great momentum. Such a scorching heat. Aubrey felt that if she even slightly straightened her body on the reef, she would be burned to ashes by the high temperature. She followed her instincts and lay flat on the back of the reef. She listened to the rumbling sound and watched as the fireballs that filled the sky flew over the reef and crashed into the blood-red battlefield ahead. Boom! At this moment, an explosion that was loud enough to overwhelm human hearing reverberated through the sky. It was a declaration of destruction to the land and the sky. The terrifying shockwave brought about a chilling storm. A grayish-white wind wall with bursts of scarlet arrived in the blink of an eye and engulfed the entire battlefield. Time. It was as if it was no longer important at this moment. All that was left in Aubrey's ears was the rumbling sound of the explosion. There was also Chisaka, who was protecting her tightly and constantly roaring, but she could not hear what he was saying. After an unknown amount of time, when the ravaged heaven and earth finally calmed down, Aubrey finally heard what Chisaka was saying. She also saw her subordinates, who were in a sorry state and covered in dust and blood, climbing up from the bottom of the reef with great difficulty. They looked panicked as they helped Chisaka up. Aubrey lifted her gaze and looked past Chisaka, who was talking nonstop to the blood-red battlefield in her memory. In the next second, Aubrey's breathing became erratic and her expression turned to one of horror. The fireballs that fell from the sky created more than a dozen huge craters on the blood-red battlefield. These craters not only divided the entire battlefield into pieces, but there were also figures that were more ferocious and terrifying than the mutated insects that Aubrey encountered. They were huge bodies that were hundreds of meters long and at least 30 meters tall. At the front, there were rows of huge eyeballs that were slowly rotating. At the back, there was a huge body that was constantly squirming and covered in sarcomas. It looked extremely disgusting. This is a mutated insect? A new mutated insect? Just as Aubrey's breathing became sluggish and she subconsciously gave the order to attack, the huge body that was comparable to Aubrey's flagship, the grass stalagmite, actually decayed. Yes, that's right. It decayed, as if it was affected by some unknown power. Under the gaze of Aubrey and the others, it rapidly turned from a ferocious and terrifying body of flesh and blood into a pile of incomparably white bones. Above the pile of white bones, two flashes of light immediately caught Aubrey's attention. They were two metallic objects that were almost in the shape of a prism. Chapter 839. At this moment, Area B36 erupted with a brilliance as bright as the sun. It was the light that erupted when two huge asteroid-like celestial bodies collided. Fatal, but there was also a sense of relief after surviving a disaster. Behind the shockwave that disappeared into the deep space, there were pairs of eyes that stared closely at the star-like light, afraid that they would miss a trace of it. Among them, there were human eyes, and there were also eyes from monsters from another world. The difference was that the humans were constantly cheering with victory as the light rose, and the eyes of those monsters were constantly searching for the figure of the brood mother that was swallowed by the light. The answer was obvious. Those monsters that were lucky enough to escape when the brood mother was hit by the pillar of heaven during the attack of the humans had lost control of the hive. So, everyone, stop attacking! Rei Minkai's order was transmitted through the combat communication channel and resounded in the ears of all the surviving human pilots in this battle. Rei, Real Flying Bird, and Luna Maria naturally stopped immediately and waited for the next move. As for the surviving pilots on the Pillar of Heaven's side, they subconsciously looked at Jean Yuduanshin Mina, who was fighting side by side with Lancelot King's sword. Everyone stop attacking. Mina's voice sounded. Then, Mina continued to ask, Knight, this battle is not over yet? In Mina's view, the impact of the Pillar of Heaven's defense had dragged the monster brood mother named Hive into the abyss of collapse. It was only a matter of time before it was completely destroyed. On this basis, if they did not take the opportunity to eliminate the enemies lingering around, it would inevitably cause a certain uncontrollable impact on the evacuation fleet. No, it's over. But our goal is far from over. Rei Minkai shook his head and pressed the button next to his hand. The next second, a piece of information about the Hive and BTA's pattern of action was transmitted to Jean Yuduanshin Mina. Mina's eyes narrowed slightly as she quickly skimmed through this seemingly short but shocking piece of information. Knight, did you follow this pattern to find the Pillar of Heaven's defense? According to the information, after these hives lost their hive, they would automatically search for the nearest hive. Then, driven by instinct, they would converge and return to the new hive. Based on this expanded speculation, Mina easily guessed why Rei Minkai's reinforcements would appear on the battlefield so accurately, and why the equipment they carried was extremely targeted. Yes, Rei Minkai didn't hide anything about this. When Rei Minkai issued the order to pause the attack, he was already prepared to confess. After all, now that the Pillar of Heaven and Hive had perished together, Mina's remaining Pillar of Heaven army did not have much of a choice. Working with Rei Minkai was the only choice Mina had. Really? Then let me wait and see. The attacks from a human stopped. The remaining beta no longer cared about the existence of the humans. nor were they reluctant to part with the broken hive. Instead, they turned to the other side of the battlefield and sped up to leave the battlefield. State 0, present, just as they were about to follow the previous approach. After State 0 began a call for battle, the unmanned reconnaissance drones hidden around the battlefield once again tracked the remaining beta. However, they unexpectedly discovered an abnormality. That's not right. Kai, these bugs don't seem to have turned to other universes. Instead, they are accelerating their descent. As soon as State Zero's voice fell, the screen in front of Ray Minkai popped up one after another with the trajectory of the remaining beta. Are they landing on Earth? Can you deduce the target? Ray Minkai's gaze focused and subconsciously connected the traces of BTA found on Earth around the Britannia Empire. According to the intelligence, the beta that had lost the rule of the hive would inevitably head to the area where the next hive was located and return to the command of the new hive. So, now that these remaining BTs did not care if they could complete the test of breaking through the atmosphere, they still wanted to forcefully descend. Did this not prove that there were no other hives in the universe around Earth, and only the information of the hives hidden on Earth was left? No, I can't deduce it. State 0 exclaimed and immediately said, "That's right. Whether it's my own computing power or the computing system of this body, I can't calculate the landing coordinates of these bugs." Immediately after, a voice sounded. "Let me do it." It turned out that it was Sharon who came to Ray Minkai's side through the real-time connection with the unmanned reconnaissance drone fleet after learning that State 0 had mobilized the unmanned reconnaissance drone fleet to carry out the tracking mission against the remaining beta. However, the result was the same. Whether it was Sharon, State 0, or Lancelot's or the King's calculation, they could not calculate the landing coordinates of these rapidly descending beta. How is it possible? Even with my computing power, I can't calculate the landing coordinates of these beta? Obviously, in the face of a series of wrong answers, Sharon, with her powerful computing power, could not accept her failure for a while. "No, Sharon, don't worry. After all, your body is not here." After Ray Minkai comforted Sharon with a few words, he looked at State 0. State 0 did not show any discouraged expression, but there was a hint of contemplation in his eyes. Ray, Jean, Luna Maria, shoot at will. This somewhat confusing order made the trio look at each other, but they did not show much hesitation. The Pulse Gundam, the Zagu warriors, and the Zagu Phantoms raised their cannons in unison and fired at their respective targets. However, the expected attack effect did not happen. After the fiery high-temperature particle beam crossed the void, it did not obliterate the target that should have been blown up. Instead, it seemed to have broken through a phantom and quietly disappeared into the deep space, leaving only the ripple-like monster's afterimage. How was it possible? What happened? The trio was stunned and fired again subconsciously. However, the result was still the same. Even if they changed the next target, the particle beam still penetrated the monster, but did not obtain any corresponding attack effect. "Sharon, did he Nana provide you with a set of data?" Sharon's holographic image fluctuated, as if she was shocked by Ray Minkai's words. Could it be an anomaly caused by the time distortion? Sharon's powerful computing power was not just for show. Under Ray Minkai's guidance, Sharon, who finally found a breakthrough, quickly performed the first round of calculations and came up with a rough result. "Kai, it's because of a chain reaction caused by the collision between the Pillar of Heaven and Hive. But rest assured, this chain reaction seems to only exist in this area, and it won't have any impact on us." How is it possible? If it exists in this area, then we, who are also in this area, will not be able to escape the impact? Ray Minkai asked. "This requires more detailed data and calculations. I have arranged for the unmanned reconnaissance aircraft to collect as much data as possible." Sharon paused for a moment before continuing. "But the only thing that remains unchanged is that we have indeed won this battle. And those betas seem to have fallen into the time distortion point and are descending through the atmosphere in a way that we can't understand." As soon as Sharon's voice fell, several rays of light suddenly flashed behind Lancelot King's sword. Kai, Sharon, lock onto the signal of armed composite wings 3 to 6. Also, send the relevant signal frequency back to the Imperial capital. Sharon's eyes flashed, and she obviously understood what Ray Minkai meant. However, even the particle beam could not directly attack the remaining betas that had fallen into the time distortion. Could the armed composite wings attack them? Of course, the answer to this question was yes. However, Ray Minkai did not want to attack the remaining betas that had fallen into the time distortion from the very beginning. Instead, he used the armed composite wings as a self-propelled signal generator. He wanted to get as close to the remaining betas as possible and fall into the time distortion point with them and land on Earth. Therefore, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the armed composite wings 3 to 6 successfully approached a battleship light-class beta and began a burning journey into the atmosphere with it. Let's go. If my guess is correct, I'm afraid that the Imperial capital will soon receive the signal from the armed composite wings 3 to 6. A naval military base on the west coast of the Britannia Empire. An assault submarine known as the Son of Dan Nu was undergoing the final step of a 6-month modification project. The final step wasn't completed by humans or machines. Instead, it was completed by the young girl named Songlan. Under the leadership of the 2 captains of the Son of Dan Nu, Teresa and Richard, the crew of the Son of Dan Nu lined up on the platform on the right side of the dry dock where the Son of Dan Nu was docked for modification, waiting for the final step of the modification project. Perhaps this was the first time the Son of Dan Nu had participated in such a strange ceremony since its service. No, it should be said that the crew of the Son of Dan Nu had participated in such a strange ceremony. The crew of the Son of Dan Nu could be said to be the elites of the navies of various countries during their active service. Naturally, they had participated in many naval battleship launching ceremonies. However, the scene before them caused them to exclaim in admiration. Cruz, who was standing at the front of the line, could not help but twist his wrist, trying to relieve the tiredness brought about by the long wait in line. Unexpectedly, he was caught red-handed by Melissa Mao at the side. Pa! Although the voice was small, the powerful lesson pierced Cruz's heart on the spot. Mao! Sister Mao! This is a ceremony. Cruz's face was distorted. He endured the pain and whispered in a hoarse voice. Cruz Wilba, silence. Melissa Mao ignored Cruz's complaints, because Richard's reprimand had already sounded. After reprimanding Cruz, Richard shook his head slightly and sighed helplessly. During this period of time, because of the modification work of the Son of Dan Nu, the crew had a long vacation to relieve the pressure brought about by the world mutation. But now, it seemed that Cruz Wilba was used to being wild. Madukas, don't be so nervous. Miss Nana won't mind. Teresa at the side smiled lightly and did not care about this. Whoa! At this moment, a series of low humming sounds accompanied by a faint light that was like a rolling wave that was surging towards them. The last step of the modification work of the Son of Dan Nu had finally begun. Chapter 840. Under the watchful eyes of the Son of Dan Slave's crew, the small figure standing on the deck of the Son of Dan Slave slowly raised her hand, and an octagonal light shield flashing with silver-white brilliance appeared. At first, this silver-white octagonal light shield was only 1 square meter in size, but the moment this silver-white octagonal light shield rose against the wind, it expanded to a size large enough to cover the entire Son of Dan Slave. This scene made the crew uncontrollably cry out in surprise on the spot. This is the technology from an advanced civilization that we can't understand. Richard, Mardukas couldn't help but swallow his saliva. The scene in front of him was beyond the scope of his understanding. First, the silver-white light shield that grew with the wind and covered the Son of Dan Slave in the blink of an eye. Then, after being covered by the silver-white light shield, the Son of Dan Slave quickly changed its familiar appearance in a way visible to the naked eye. No, while the appearance changed, the interior of the Son of Dan Slave had been completely changed. from the original assault submarine, it had completely become a high-speed warship that could be used in a wide area. That's right. The son of Dan's slave, which could only gallop above the ocean, was now completely different. It had become a space warship that could independently rush out of the atmosphere and break free from gravity. Such an astonishing change made Richard Mardukas, a veteran Navy general, unable to control his actions. Just think about it. Richard Mardukas, who had galloped through the sea all his life, unexpectedly became a space warship captain. How could this not make him excited? Hedron shield. It's really a magical technology, isn't it? Mardukas. Teresa smiled gently and looked at her former first officer, Richard Mardukas. Yes, it's really a magical technology. I heard that as long as you master this technology, you can complete the feat of crossing the universe alone. Watching the son of Dan's slave take the last step of its rebirth journey, Richard Mardukas couldn't help but sigh. Yes, Nana was indeed capable of doing that. It's a pity that this technology is undoubtedly a taboo existence for current humans. Compared to Richard Mardukas' sigh, Teresa was more aware of the harsh conditions to successfully master the Hedron shield. Existing today in this world of war and strife, there were probably not many people who could master this super technology that was several levels above the current human civilization. Yes, even Her Majesty the Empress who guarded the imperial capital, and that night couldn't do it. Once upon a time, Teresa also tried to touch the Hedron shield to see if she had the potential to activate and master this super technology. The result was regrettable, of course. Apart from Teresa herself, perhaps it had something to do with the ripples that appeared in the deepest part of her mind when she came into contact with the Hedron shield. Thinking of this, Teresa's face. Fortunately, the transformation of Dan's slave son finally came to an end. As the silver light shield covering the son of Dan's slave son turned into a sky full of stars, the brand new son of Dan's slave son was completely revealed in front of everyone. In the starlight, as her long hair fluttered in the sky, Hinana stepped on the silver octagon and slowly landed in front of Teresa. Teresa, the transformation of the son of Dan's slave son has been completed. Looking at the little face that was still young but already showed the demeanor of a peerless beauty, Teresa couldn't help but smile softly. Thank you very much, Nana. It's no big deal. In the past, when I summon my main battleship, it will cause a bigger commotion. Hearing Hinana's naive words, Teresa smiled helplessly. Yes, the son of Dan's slave son that she was proud of was nothing. Okay, Mardukas, let everyone board the ship. We don't have much time. Teresa's mood was only low for a moment, but she immediately adjusted and let Richard Mardukas lead everyone to familiarize and master the new son of Dan's slave son as soon as possible. Yes, Captain. Despite Teresa's repeated reminders, all the crew members, including Richard Mardukas, still recognized Teresa as the captain of the son of Dan's slave son. What a group of good subordinates. Teresa, looking at the crew members who boarded the ship in an orderly manner under the command of Richard Mardukas and returned to their posts, Hinana pretended to be mature and nodded. Teresa saw this in her eyes, but she didn't point it out. Yes, it's all thanks to Mardukas. After thinking about it, Teresa asked again, right? Where's Mimi? Sister? She has some things to investigate. She doesn't have time to come here for the time being. Hinana tilted her head. Thinking of her sister's appearance when she left, she couldn't help but shake her head. Regarding this, Teresa didn't want to continue this topic. Coincidentally, Hinana was happy to change the topic. Oh, right. I just detected a very interesting signal. Signal? Teresa was taken aback and didn't seem to react. Yes, it's that guy's signal. That guy. The smart Teresa almost immediately thought of who that guy was. Yes, just now, a signal of unknown origin flew over the port where we are and flew toward the South Pacific Ocean. Hinana said and gestured. She didn't even forget that when she was transforming the son of the pill slave, she released the signal's movement trajectory. Knight, what's wrong? Teresa's panic only lasted for a moment, but it greatly satisfied Nana's mischievous heart. No, that's not that guy's distress signal. To be precise, it's just a signal sent by the gadget on the Lancelot, Sword of the King. Gadget. Teresa frowned slightly and had already guessed the truth of the gadget. Armed composite flying wing system. At the beginning of the design, the two whisperers, Teresa and Sarah, were consulted. South Pacific Ocean, armed composite flying wing? Really? It seems that the new son of the pill slave, Chu Hang, is settled. Teresa was very clear about what existed in the South Pacific Ocean. During the transformation of the son of the pill slave, the Britannia Empire had already continuously discharged a group of surveillance drones to monitor the area called Obu by Ray Minkai. Teresa, you guessed it right. There's news from the imperial capital. As soon as Inanna's voice fell, a jeep rushed over. A soldier in the imperial military uniform didn't wait for the jeep to stop. He jumped down and ran to Teresa and Inanna. Lady Teresa, Miss Inanna, Imperial Emergency Order. As soon as the order was issued, the son of the pill slave, who had completed the transformation, immediately set off to the area where the signal was sent to begin the search mission. All expedients are decided by Lady Teresa. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.